Man, I meant to bring that to you 3 months ago.
Commissioner Fickus.
Good
morning, sir.
morning, Commissioner.
How are you?
I'm doing all right.
Yeah.
Nothing really crazy.
That was not my gavel.
Morning, JD.
Morning, Roy. How are you?
I'm good.
Clerk, call the roll.
Glenn Whitley, County Judge.
Here.
Roy Charles Brooks, Commissioner Precinct 1.
Present.
Devin Allen, Commissioner Precinct 2.
Here.
Barry Biggess, Commissioner Precinct 3.
Here.
Stacey Johnson, Commissioner Precinct 4.
Here.
Constitutes a quorum.
Thank you. Our invocation today will be delivered by Pastor Brendan Johnson from Christ Church of Fort Worth. Thank you so much for coming out today. After the invocation, please remain standing for our pledges.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, thank you today for the leadership that you put in place. God, thank you for the wisdom that you will grant us to make ourselves better and to make our community better. We pray all these things in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you, Pastor.
Members of the court, we have several agenda announcements this morning. First one is in the county auditor's office, item B4. There's revised court communication in your red folder. There was just one minor change as far as the cycle of when those audits have to be performed. Also, members of the court, as we have in the past, we're going to take various items under or out of order. And just a quick comment, because of the various things that we're going to be doing over the next 6 to 8 weeks, our court sessions are going to be somewhat longer than we have had in the past, so they will be going into the afternoons and maybe even into the late afternoons. The purpose of this is to make sure that we meet the requirements that the Commissioner's Court is put on staff as far as work sessions. And so you're going to see a lot of material. One of the things that you're going to see as we get into our section is some strategy developments as it relates to ARPA and the federal relief funds. And so that's going to be an ongoing work session that we will have. That'll probably take about 4 to 6 weeks, or 4 to 6 sessions, in order to totally complete. As it relates to the briefing items themselves, we've got several this morning that we're going to take out of order. Once we get to the administrator section, we are going to move into the general obligation bond program. We have our FAs here, and we're going to talk about financing a little bit. That's something that the court has requested. So Ms. Alexander from RFA will be leading that discussion. Then we're going to go into the City of Arlington tax increment financing reinvestment zone. Your Honor, I think we do have a public comment on a sheet on that particular one. Then we're going to go to the PACE program, and then finally we'll go to the current and emerging health issues. That has always been part of the administrator section, and we'll continue that. At the very end, we will go ahead and have just a very quick update on the 87th regular session of the legislature. And then, as you notice on your agenda, we do have a work session today, and it's the ARPA topic. So As I said, we're going to be covering a lot of material in these next 4 to 6 to 8 weeks. Also, just a few comments. We do not have Commissioners Court next week, and the Project Evaluation Committee of the bond program is going to be meeting Thursday of this week at 2 p.m. And then finally, the PEBC has a meeting tomorrow at 2 p.m. also. So with that, those are the agenda announcements.
And Mr. Mayor, what I may try to do is, because of the length of the meeting, those folks who are here to just address not specific agenda items, I may go ahead and ask them to come forward at the beginning of the meeting as well. And then, as you said, we'll try to move people in the briefing items. Let's do our shorter briefings first,
Right.
so that we can get the TERS and we can get some of those folks out of here.
And I do believe that we have just one audience participation or public participation. That is just a general comment.
Well, I'll check with Mr. Bennett. I know that he mentions on here the regular session, and that could be under the,
That's under the briefing
yeah.
item.
If you'll give me just 1 minute, Mr. Bennett, then I'll probably go ahead and call you up, and then, or I'll ask you a question before we go forward from there. Court members, you have before you the minutes of our regular meeting of June the 15th.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Commissioner Allen, you want to go ahead and push your button. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Proclamations. Commissioner Johnson, I believe you have a proclamation.
Yes, I have one. It's for ratification only. I would move for its approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Other announcements?
Yeah, I have 2 quick announcements. One is just a reminder for folks that this coming Thursday from 9 a.m. to 12 noon at the Mansfield Sub Courthouse, in partnership with our Public Health Department, we will have a pop-up clinic to provide COVID-19 vaccines. An appointment is not needed, but you can also make an appointment. So again, that is this Thursday, June 24th from 9 to noon at the Mansfield Sub Courthouse. And then also, I wanted to just take a moment to recognize one of our team members. This past Friday evening, I had the great opportunity to attend the Dr. Marion J. Brooks Living Legends Award, of course, named after in the legacy of Commissioner Brooks's family. And one of my team members, Jay Jackson, was honored as a legend in the making. And I want to just share that news. I told him I was going to embarrass him. And if you all know Jay, have worked with Jay, you know he doesn't require a lot of attention, but he works tremendously hard. I appreciate the fact that we are very alike in the really important ways, and then in every other way we're very different. And as you know, you always have to have someone on your team that is going to be your opposite. And so I want to thank him for all of his hard work, and congratulations. Yeah.
Does that mean that you're high maintenance and he's low?
I mean, you might have a point. Nope, don't even say it.
I'm doing everything I can to just resist the opportunity here.
That's all right. Thank you.
One of the things, again, I want to highlight, our registration now is, I believe, nearing 1,400 folks for our Senior Synergy event, which is coming up on July the 1st at Will Rogers. Again, it is a free event. It starts at 8:30 in the morning, and we have free lunch. But we have a lot of vendors who will be there who are providing services for our older adults and caregivers. We will be offering vaccines, I believe all three versions of the vaccine will be available that day. And so I would strongly encourage, if you know of anyone who might be interested in coming out to our senior event, there'll be workshops. We have a lot of great stuff going on. And so pass it along to a friend if you, to make sure if they're interested that they attend. Again, you can call our office to register, 817-884-1234, and we'll get you taken care of. Catherine has worked very hard. The whole office has worked very hard on getting this event ready to go, and Catherine's excited about where it's going at this point in time. Any other announcements? Okay, then court members, you have before you our consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Okay. So do we want to, let's start with our public comments. And I'm going to call on Mr. Bennett first, Daniel Bennett first. Do you prefer to wait until our legislative briefing occurs, or do you have a specific item that you wish to speak to and address?
No, sir. I'll go with public comments. I just have something that's related to the 87th legislative session. That's why I circled it.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and come forward at this point in time, and we won't put you through the ordeal of the 3 or 4 hour wait.
I'm used to that. I've been to over 40 taxing entities. I've been to Colleyville at 12:30 at night.
Excuse me, before you start, let me go ahead and get you to go ahead and state your name, and you understand we may be able to respond since it is on legislation.
Well, that would be entirely appropriate,
Okay, go ahead.
if you'd like to. My name is Daniel Bennett, 408 Pemberton, White Settlement. Judge Whitley, Commissioner Ficus, Commissioner Johnson, and Commissioner Brooks, and our new commissioner, Allen.
Hello.
Hi. You may not remember me, which you won't remember me at all.
Okay.
From December 5th of 2017, the day this body tabled your casting of 541 votes for the TAD BOD election. On that day, with your permission, Judge Whitley, I approached the dais in hope to keep the Commissioner's Court, in your own vernacular, on the straight and narrow. As you and the Commissioners returned one by one from the employee recognition in room 504C, I urge each of you individually not to table the TAD vote, but to vote. I said, it's on your agenda, vote. And Judge Whitley, you quit back to me. This is my recollection. And if I'm wrong, I do apologize, but you said, young man, do not come in here and tell me how to run my court. Mr. May has stated that same day, greater surety if you want to wait, because he was responding to Commissioner Wynn at the time. Wait till next Tuesday and guarantee that your nominees get on the board. Well, you tabled that day. You pushed a vote, you tabled. On December 8th of 2015, Mr. May stated, now this is the previous vote from 2015, I checked with TAD yesterday, and Mr. Wood already has sufficient number of votes to place him on the board. Mr. Bennett, it's Johnny Bennett, not me. I believe a number we cast is 562. The Commissioner Brooks, the 2015 motion was, I move, as we did last year, Tarrant County casts all of its votes for Mr. Johnny Bennett. Well, after showing your TAD 2015 video to many taxing entities, several decided to push their 2017 vote post yours. You were going to vote on the 8th. They moved theirs to the 9th, 10th, 11th. Well, the court and Mr. Mace was set up for failure. That's what happened. But yet I tried to save you from yourselves by encouraging you to do the right thing and vote, not the table. That's what happened. This court failed, and in doing so, in my opinion, harmed the citizens of small entities, particularly not White Settlement, because the head of residential at the time was my school board president. In my estimation, your ethics failed you that day. I think the system was misused. It's a system of good faith and judgment. The governor has signed a bill to correct the deficiencies in this matter. HB 988, it's a 32-page bill. On page 2 and 3, you will now be required to cast your ballot within your first or second meeting after receiving your ballot, and you must have your resolution to the chief appraiser within 3 days of your action. This will be true for all governing bodies with greater than 5% of the total countywide vote. So you guys are going first, not last.
Your time is up.
Well,
and
thank you, sir.
I guess the one comment I'd make is I do not remember ever having said to someone, don't tell me how to run my court.
Okay, sir. Well, I do apologize. That's just my recollection.
But I would also say that, if the law requires us to do something, we'll do it.
As
At
understood.
the point in time that we did, we could wait, and we had always chosen in years past to wait until we had as much input available and information available to us till we had to cast our ballot. So we'll look at it as the new law comes in and go forward from there. But I don't agree that necessarily any of our ethics was changed. We were able to vote with as much information available to us as we had at that time. And I would hope that we'll always wait until we have information available before we make our decision on how to vote.
Well, I appreciate that. I challenged the court saying that the other entities have just as much acuity to choose these board members as does the commissioners. By virtue of your size, it shouldn't dictate who gets on these boards. It should be a plenary decision throughout the county. And tabling, in my opinion, was wrong. And I had Ms. Wilson's office look at this for me with Ann Diamond and Matthew Smid back in 2017. And you didn't do anything wrong. Sharon was very clear about that. So I went down to Austin and had it changed.
Thank you very much, and we'll abide by the law in the future. Thank you, Mr. Bennett.
Thank you.
Next is Thomas and I'm going to mispronounce this all over the place, so I'm just going to say Thomas, and you can pronounce it when you get over there.
Torlencassi.
Thank you, Judge Whitley. My name is Thomas Torlencassi. I live at 1515 6th Avenue. For the 40 years prior to that, I lived and voted in the same precinct here in Tarrant County. I'm here to say thank you 3 times to you. The first thank you is for having us speak early in the meeting because I need to get back to my bulldozer that I got on at 5:30. My second thank you is the only other time I spoke to the Commissioner's Court was in favor of making countywide voting an option for voters. So thank you for voting 4-1. I'm still scratching my head over why one particular person didn't vote for it. And my third thank you is to thank you for showing us exactly who you are. I say that because I'm not going to tell you how to run your court for 3 reasons. This is our court, and y'all are public servants. I just wanted to remind you of that. Nearly everyone in the room is on the public payroll. There are no citizens here today except for me and the gentleman before me that I can see speaking. Last week, there were some people in your meeting that were disruptive. And apparently under Texas code, they may or may not have committed disorderly conduct. It's a real fine line in the higher courts as to what is disorderly conduct and what is free speech, but that's for courts to decide. What troubled me was that you probably should listen to Commissioner Allen more often because she seems to be the most level-headed commissioner consistently. And she pointed out to the media that it was a free speech act to speak their mind in court last week. I know you don't necessarily agree with that, but that's not the level of distress that I have today, because it was your comments that you might get with some others and see if you can construct a way to ban their attendance at future meetings. The problem with that is if you and one other public official does that, and they've already exercised their free speech rights or their right to redress and their free speech in the future, you have committed a federal offense. There is U.S. code. I'm glad that the district attorney is here and the staffer is here to explain that to you. But there are specific felonies for trying to block someone for exercising their constitutional rights or having already exercised their constitutional rights. That might not be something that's pleasant to hear as I speak and exercise my First Amendment, but I'm just giving you this point that this is our court, this is our government, and that we have the right to come and speak before you. Yeah, probably with a little bit more decorum and civility than some of the presenters do, but the folks that were here last week, they're not second-class citizens. They're not children of a lesser God. They have the same right that all the rest of Americans do.
Thomas, thank you for speaking in an orderly fashion. And I believe that's all that was to speak on just general topics. So from there, we can go into our agenda, and then as we hit those other items, we will call on those individuals at that time.
Thank you, Your Honor. We can now go to the briefing items, and we're going to take the general obligation bond program up first. I'm going to ask Ms. Alexander to come forward. Ms. Alexander is our financial advisor. She's from Hilltop Securities. This was a request that the court made to look at different potential revenue flows depending on the valuation, and the court simply wanted to have a general discussion with you. And I know that Laura has presented some material in your packet, and I think we have some slides also.
Good morning.
And before you start, let me just say that I did send out to the court members, we did receive our June statement from TAD. Of course, that's not the official statement. We'll get the July 25th one, which will set our tax rate. And just on a comparison basis from June of last year to June of this year, we're showing about a 4% increase in value. Ms. Alexander.
Thank you. Good morning. So as GK mentioned, I'm going to quickly run through basically what you can afford for a new bond program under various assumptions, and then I'll be on my way. Wanted to lead off with really the outstanding debt of the county. Obviously, that this is the baseline for what we would be adding debt onto, and so it's important to remember sort of what you have outstanding. Right now, the county has about $240 million outstanding. You can see the final payoff dates of those issues. About a little over half of the county's debt will actually be repaid within the next 5 years, so it's a pretty rapid amortization, rapid repayment of the debt, and I'll show you that here on the next slide. And just so you'll have a sense of what your borrowing cost has been for these historical issues, it's kind of a weighted average borrowing cost of about 2.53%. So next slide is the annual debt payments. Again, this is just what you pay each year. You have scheduled payments this year of about $34 million, and again, all of your debt will be repaid in 2035 if you didn't issue any new debt. And you can see how quickly it falls off there. As I mentioned, about a little over half of it will be repaid within the next 5 years. So setting that as sort of the floor, I guess, to then talk about, well, what all goes into debt capacity, and you think about all the factors, it's probably a little bit more complicated than you might think. So we look at, obviously, the existing debt structure. We look at the property value growth assumption. So Mr. Manius just mentioned 4% is where you're currently seeing that. I ran actually a variety of growth assumptions you'll see in a minute. The debt service tax rate, so the amount of revenue that you actually bring in is a function of the debt tax rate and the values, the property values, the number of years in the bond election planning period. We're looking at a 10-year planning period for the next bond election, so that's the capacity will be what you could afford over a 10-year period, for example. Interest rates are obviously a big driver. And then the term of the debt, the county's historically sold 20-year debt for new projects and facilities, and we're assuming 20 years on this one as well. And then how the principal gets repaid. We're assuming sort of a mortgage-style level payment type amortization. We can customize that, but again, just sort of a jumping-off point. And the county, as you might have noticed on the first page, a lot of those issues had refundings in them, so that's a refinancing. And when rates are lower, we go back and take a look at your old debt and refinance them for savings. And so that certainly impacts your capacity going forward. The next refinancing opportunity the county has is in 2 years. So the property value growth, this is a historical table showing the growth assumptions that you've had over the last 10 years. You can see the average growth, the compound annual growth rate for the last 10 years has been 5.8%. That's the orange line going across the middle. Obviously, the growth assumptions range quite a bit depending on sort of the economy and other factors, and new commercial development in particular. I think that chart speaks for itself.
If you could go back
Yep,
to that
sure.
one. In the printed version, it just says cell range, so I'm just seeing these numbers.
Yeah, sorry, it didn't come through in the PDF.
No, it's okay.
The 21, you have that was last year, right?
Yeah, so it's a current budget year. Yeah, but it came out last summer.
Okay, thank you.
So the assumptions that we're using in our model right now, as I said, I'll just hit them quickly. We're talking about a November election this year with bond sales starting next summer, each year for 10 years, maintaining the current debt service tax rate, which is 0.016552 cents. New debt repaid over 20 years. The interest rate assumptions are listed here. So we're assuming 2.6% for the borrowing cost for next year, which is 1% above current market, if you could believe it or not. Right now, if you were to sell bonds, 20-year bonds, you would sell them around 1.6% for 20 years. That's how low rates are. And then we assume rates will climb over time. That's not really a crystal ball. That's just conservatism. It's always, in my business, it's always better to be conservative and then, hopefully come in better. And if any of the assumptions that we've made, if they come in better than that, that means maybe you could afford to sell bonds, the whole program, in, say, 7 years or 8 years instead of 10 years, for example. So there's some flexibility, obviously, in how that actually gets rolled out, depending on how the assumptions play out. And then we're also assuming $400 million for transportation projects and trying to cover $105 million for a new justice building and associated parking. And it's important to note, and I'm just going to give a kind of a call out real quick, that the transportation piece and the facilities piece would be separate propositions on the ballot. And that's a state law issue, and the funds would need to be tracked separately. And I just sort of call that out as you start thinking about how much you can afford when it matters which bucket you're talking about. So transportation projects, once you sell the bonds for transportation, they have to be spent on transportation. You can't go back and sort of swap them around. And if you have any legal questions, we have your bond counsel, co-bond counsel here. There's Bob Dransfield with Norton Rose Fulbright and Jonathan Kranz with Kelly Hart and Hallman. So as you get into the process questions, that's more for them. So here are the various assumptions that we modeled from 3% up to the compound annual growth rate of 5.83%. So that's using the same assessed value property growth assumption every year for 10 years is what we've modeled. So 3% every year for 10 years would equate to a capacity of $524 million based on the assumptions I just walked through. So 3.5%, if it's a little better than that, $558 million. And 4%, sounds like that's kind of where things roughly are, would be $594 million is what you could afford over the 10-year time period. Make sense?
How does the impact of what our borrowing rate is enter into this calculation?
So the borrowing costs, or as I outlined, so we're assuming they start at 2.6% next summer, and then they would increase to 3.5% the year after that, 4.5%, and up to 5%, which I know sounds really high, and we haven't seen those rates in a long time. We can certainly take all these same assumptions and look at sensitivity on interest rates. Like I said, it's probably a little bit more of, in some ways, letting the projects define the scope to some extent, because we're not going to get this right. And I mean by that is we're not going to get here in 10 years and say this is exactly how it turned out to be. So again, this is sort of, I'm your financial advisor, but also have been through a lot of bond programs. It's a little bit of a scope issue in terms of what you want to, and then knowing the affordability piece of it. So could you sell, potentially $600 million? Probably so. Is it going to be 9 years or 10 years or 11 years? I don't know. We also have, like I said, the refunding opportunities, the future opportunities to refinance your existing debt would impact capacity, and we don't model those in. We don't build those refinancing opportunities into our model because we don't really know what rates will be when those bonds become eligible for refundings. So there's a lot of pieces that move. So I'm just going to...
The one thing about that is that, and Laura's exactly right, we will know every year as we go through this process what the rates are going to be and what our growth is going to be. And so that's going to allow the court to adjust as to how much you can borrow in any one year. So that's why there's this difference between 3% and 5.8%.
Yeah, and I think that'll become more evident here on this slide. So I just took the 3%, the lowest, most conservative assessed value growth case, and mapped out what the 10-year of bond sales would look like. And so in 2022, next summer, you have a lot of debt falling off. You could actually sell $77 million, again, based on all these assumptions. And then only $15.6 million the following year because your existing debt structure drives that more. Does that make sense? So what we're dealing with. So like I said, there is a refunding opportunity in 2023. So my best guess is we could probably eke out more than $15 million. And if rates are a little bit lower, things like that. And we can also not sell mortgage-style amortization. We can customize the debt repayment a little bit. So these are not hard and fast, even if these assumptions were to hold true. But they're meant to be guidelines. So this is how the full $524 million of the 3% sort of rolls out. I do want to note that the Justice Building is estimated at $105 million, as I mentioned earlier. And my understanding is that design begins in 2022. Construction is August 2023 to August 2025. So that $105 million is accelerated on the front half of this bond program. So if you look at in 2025, you will have sold $175 million. So that's the orange line cumulatively at that time. And 105 of the 175 would have been used for the Justice Building. So it leaves only a little over $70 million for transportation projects in that scenario. If we look at the 4% scenario, just those same numbers would leave about $99 million for transportation projects through 2025, again, based on these assumptions. Does that make sense?
So you said, obviously at this you're saying about $70.7
million.
$70 million at 3%.
Yeah, see, 3% growth would leave $70 million for transportation. And
that's also assuming that the interest rates are going up.
Yes.
What is a point in the interest rate? Do you have any idea or recall what a point in the interest rate has on this stuff?
It's hard. I can come back to you with that number. Rerun it at like less than 1% for the future sales. It's cumulative, and it's a little bit. It's not something I can calculate on the fly. So.
Right, and because I think these are very conservative, which is what we'd want you to be. But I think that $70 million for the first, through 2025 is going to be a very limiting number to our transportation. And that doesn't mean that's not what it's going to end up being. But I also believe that the building, I would love to see the Justice Building built by the end of 25. I'm looking like it may be more toward 26 by the time it's completed. But I would hope, one, that the interest rate, it would be interesting to see if you just went up a point on the interest rate for the next 5 years, what difference that would make in the calculation, and assumed, I find it hard to believe that with the way we're hearing the boom in housing around this metroplex that we're talking about a 4%, even a 3, certainly not a 3, but I would be amazed if we're not talking about 5, we're back to 5 or 6%. And I understand that commercial weighs into this also, but, you know, we're still growing pretty rapidly, even in the commercial area. Maybe not in the downtown buildings, but I think I don't want to scare the transportation folks into thinking that they're going to have to spread this stuff out over, we're really not going to be able to afford to give them very much money until year 5 or 6.
Yep, I understand. We'll model a lower interest rate assumption and report back.
I would model one that doesn't go above 2.5%, and I would be looking at a growth rate of 4.5% to 5%. And I think you've got the 5. You did growth rates at 5%, I believe.
Yes, we ran 5 and up to that 5.83, that 10-year.
I might at least look at 5. Again, I don't have any problem looking at it on the conservative side, but I'd also like to know what it means if we go back to, what was the average over the last 5 years?
Well, it's probably closer to like 7 or 8% in the last 5 years, yeah.
That's why I'm saying I don't have any problem with looking at 5 or 6% growth and seeing what that does to us.
So just to recap, so if I look at it with lower interest rates, you want to see how much faster the bond program can be done? Is that how you want to measure it?
I want to see how much more money would be available in the earlier years, because we told these folks that we wanted a 5-year shovel-ready project. And now we're saying that in 5 years, oh, by the way, we're only going to have, you know, I guess through 26, we would have we'd have 180 million available out of a $400 million project.
Yeah, and once again, these are just projections. The key to all this is to understand what the INS rate is. It's 0.16, and as the values grow, they can either be 3, 4, 5%, whatever. What the court might want to look at is if we maintain the INS rate at that, and the value goes up, how much debt can we sell and maintain that rate? Because that will give you a steady rate. It'll increase, and just as you say, if it's 2.5% or 3%, or if the values go up even a little bit higher, then that's going to give us the flexibility to go ahead and sell more debt. And that means that we'll have more money in our coffers that we'll be able to use to do the transportation.
And that's why I would like, let's run, what rate, I mean, I would say 5 to 6% for the, let's.
I'd be comfortable with that.
I think that's reasonable.
So shoot 5.5% increase in appraised values, and as far as interest rates, 2.5%.
I predict that by the time we get to the July tax roll, we'll be over 5% growth rate.
I think you're right on that too.
So GK, where does the JPS bond fall? Where should the JPS bond fall into this conversation?
So, of course, the JPS package has already been approved by the voters, and they can begin selling debt whenever they'd like to do that. They've got some projects that they're looking at.
Right.
It doesn't affect our tax rate, and they've taken the same position at JPS, so they can borrow the money necessary to pay off the $800 million without having to raise anything to do with the hospital tax rate.
Right.
And so neither tax rate should increase as a result of anything that we're talking about.
You know, one does not impact the other.
So let's use 5.5%.
That's what I wanted to hear.
One doesn't impact the other.
So let's use the 5.5% appraised value increase, and let's look, is everybody okay with assuming that interest rates aren't going to go above 2.5% for the next?
I don't know. If the economy continues to stay as robust as it has, I think it could go higher.
I feel less sure about it though. I said I feel less sure about it, but I can't point to any particular reason
But
why.
does it, I don't think it goes a whole lot higher.
Let's go 2.5% for, let's see, let me go back to where you had.
But you
Since
know,
we're talking about a 10-year time period,
Yeah.
Judge, and I mean, there is potential for inflation. I mean, I would be okay maybe capping the high rate at 4% instead of 5%. But that's a long planning period, and
How
we've been
many
in
years have we been below 2?
only a couple, less than 2, yeah. But, I mean, these aren't all 20-year bond issues on the front page. So when we recap, I mean, what your borrowing cost would be today,
I wouldn't want to go above 3.5%.
we can run some sensitivity on that. So.
We're just looking at, you know, what
Just
I'm
what the
trying to
impact.
do is give our transportation committee at least some sort of an idea that, you know, because we're fixing to ratchet them down quite a bit.
Understood.
Or we're going to say among the commissioners that we're not going to spend any discretionary dollars until 6 years out.
That's not gonna work.
I didn't think it would. Speaking for at least 2 that are going, and I didn't hear anything out of the other one that's going to be up for election next year, but, yeah, and even me, I want to spend all mine before I leave in 18 months.
Just want to address the needs. That's what I want to do.
Plenty of needs. Okay, if you'll run those and just circulate those back through the.
Yep, happy to do that.
That'd be helpful.
So, and just in conclusion, quickly recap the timing, the bond election timing, since we're talking about a November election. State law provides a very short window for the county to call an election, and really the only court meeting date in that window is August 10th. That would be the date that the Commissioners Court would adopt the election order. It would include the dollar amount and the dollar amount by proposition in the election order. And again, if you have questions on the legal part of the process, I'll step aside. And then you can just see a couple of the other key dates. This is a very abbreviated timeline. There's a little bit more that goes on in the background, especially as it relates to locations and early voting and things like that. But the election day would be November 2nd.
and we're working with bond counsel on this. Our schedule is based on this. And for what it's worth, the information that we need by Tuesday, August the 10th for the vote is the dollar amount. That's pretty much set. It's $400 million for transportation and 105 for justice-related buildings. So those numbers are already set.
Have we resolved the issue with regards to our ability to use any of the transportation dollars for transit?
I think the district attorney's office has come back to us and said that we can't do that.
I thought the question was mass transit versus mobility or something like that. So
Yeah, with the issue, the question that was originally posed to us was, can we use those funds for mass transit projects? And the answer from our office was, no, you cannot. Now, we did discuss there may be other ways to accomplish that, but based on this bond project, under the general statute, our legal advice at the time is you cannot do that.
Did you talk with Frank Stevenson over at DART, and y'all both had agreed on that concept?
I did. We actually both agreed on that now. Frank Stevenson didn't have a different approach that we disagreed with, but it was one of those, there's another way to accomplish it. But on the original question that was posed to us on whether you can use these bond funds for mass transit, the lawyers at Locke Lord and our office agreed.
No offense, but when we asked the question, if we need to ask the question in a different way, or if there are ways that we can go about accomplishing what we want, that's what we need. That's what I at least want to hear, and not just, no, you can't use it for mass transit. But oh, by the way, if you had asked whether we could use it for transit, yeah, we could use it for transit. So please don't just tell me no on mass. Tell me how, if we can use it to move more than one person in a car around, how do we go about wording it in such a way that we won't be precluded from doing that?
And how, isn't Harris County doing some things with bond money in the realm of transportation, transit, moving people.
And to answer your question directly about Harris County, they have general statutes there addressing Harris County that does not necessarily apply to Tarrant County. The other methods of accomplishing that task, and I think we've talked to GK's office previously about this, would be forming a transit authority, the county forming its own transit authority, which is completely outside of the potential bond issue. But when looking at the bond issue, and there may have been a mistake in the terminology there, Judge, but with using those funds for the transit issues, we cannot do that. Now, if the court wants to address other issues like creating a transit authority, similar to what Harris County has done or other counties has done, we would have to look further into that. But to answer the question about spending these bonds funds, we simply can't use it for that way. And Locklord was in agreement of that as well.
What did we create 3 or 4 years ago? If y'all were, you weren't here, I don't think, but remember we got the oil and gas money from the state to repair county roads, and we had to form a...
Russell's shaking his, he looks like he's trying to shake his head up and down versus sideways. So why don't we see if he can enlighten us to what the up and down versus
This
sideways
was through
means.
money through TxDOT.
Those are transportation reinvestment zones that we did
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah.
That's not a transit authority. And what that was that we had to actually create a zone that was in the area where you were going to do the repairs.
Okay.
That type of deal.
And those were found to be unconstitutional. And that bill was found to be unconstitutional.
Which session?
84.
Okay.
And then this session, HGR 99, was passed, which will allow counties to do transportation reinvestment zones, to where no more than 65% of the amount of the increase in ad valorem property taxes can be applied to a transportation project. So those, if that passes if the voters choose to pass that in November, that is, and
That's
that
one
will
of the
back in existence.
constitutional amendments.
That does not allow us to issue debt, does it?
That will allow for debt. It cannot be debt for toll roads. So those can be done towards that. And I believe the issue that Chris was talking about regarding the transit issue was specifically related to whether or not the county would have to create its own transit authority. So the DART and Trinity Metro both are under regional transit authorities. The interaction between the county and a regional transit authority has its own set of statutes. Harris County has a county transit authority. And since it is a county transit authority, they have a different set of statutes on how they can use funds back and forth. So we have two separate situations, and I believe that the outside counsel that Chris and his office worked with on this particular issue said that the way to get through this is to just create a county transit authority, the county to create a county transit authority, which you could then give money to, and then that entity could then give money to the regional transit authority.
Or we could contract with the regional transit authority to provide whatever transportation initiatives we wanted to do.
Yes, and depending on where those funds come from, of course. But absolutely, Judge, and that's the distinction I wanted to make sure this court understood. As far as we also talked to colleagues down there in Harris County to ensure that we understood how they were set up, and of course, them having their own county transit authority puts it in a different ballgame than what this court was looking at before. So we would have to take us out of the realm of looking at those potential bond funds and how to use those funds to accomplish that goal. And it would be a completely different, of course, legal process and financial process for this court.
Okay. So I know that there had been some interest on the court to at least be able to participate or do something, maybe not in mass transit, but in transit.
Right.
I think in the long run, it might be in our best interest to create a county Transit Authority. It won't help us with this particular issue, but in the long run, it's in our best interest to get to regional rail service. And in order to do that, we probably need to set up a county transit authority so we can work with DART, we can work with the COG and others to leverage dollars to create regional rail in Tarrant County.
And maybe that's something that TRTC could undertake to, as the region area here. Maybe the other, when you start talking about setting up another authority, that sounds like you're talking about another tax.
Not necessarily.
Well, and that's
It's an enabling vehicle.
That's what I need to hear more understanding about, is exactly what establishing another authority does, because if that meant that we then finance things through that authority via a tax, I would want to take a portion, I might support taking a portion of Tarrant County's total tax and moving it over there, but I wouldn't be in favor of creating an additional tax that would exceed what we're already charging.
I don't think we need to jump to,
Yeah, we got a lot, we need to look at it, you're right.
It would probably require an election.
Probably so, to create an authority. That would be my guess. I'm wondering, is there any way, Russell, is there any way that we could condition our, and this may be a legal question too, you knew it's coming. Is there any way that we can condition our bond wording that says if this other proposition passes, that funds elected on during this particular issue might be able to be moved over to that particular authority?
Judge can...
Let the attorneys answer that question.
Oh,
I think they were real happy with Russell answering that question.
Good morning,
But
Commissioners.
at least this way we get something for the hourly rate you guys are charging for sitting out there in that audience.
Before you get started, will you remind me of your name?
Absolutely. Jonathan Krantz from Kelly Hart and
okay.
Hallman.
Very good.
I'm here together with my co-bond counsel, Bob Dransfield from Norton Rose Fulbright. The short answer, unfortunately, is no. The county, we've got a lot of state law out there on this point, but your propositions are singular in nature. So when we do this transportation package, you're going to have a proposition out there that is essentially roads and similar modes of transportation. Anything under that will be limited accordingly. So there will be, we couldn't do any sort of conditional mode under that to get the funds elsewhere.
And we cannot, from what I understand then, we cannot as a county put a proposition on there that would support mass transit or transit.
I'll let Bob speak to that. I have not looked into that question personally, so I don't have an answer for you here this morning on that. Bob may.
Well, but Judge, members of the court, good morning. My name is Bob Dransfield with Norton Rose Fulbright. We're your co-bond counsel. And fundamentally, Judge, you always got to find the specific statutory authority for doing what you're doing. So in the case of the transportation with roads, that's a pretty easy process to do. If you're trying to say, can we find a statutory authority to go ahead and have support for other entities, that's a different process, and you're going to have a hard time finding that legislative support or statutory support today. That's not to say you couldn't find it in the future if the legislature makes a change, but I think today you would have a hard time doing that. The other thing to note, when you look at a lot of these transportation authorities, lots of times they're not talking about a property tax for supporting their obligations. They're really talking more about a sales tax or some other tax, and anytime you're going to go with that, even a sales tax, you're going to, the way the laws are written today, you're going to have to go back to the voters to get the approval of that particular component part. So there are going to be very few processes that could kind of work without going back to the voters to receive some sort of direction from them, whether it's a property tax or whether it's some other type of a particular limited tax like a sales tax. It's a little different discussion than you're having when you're talking about the tax increment that may come about from a reinvestment zone. So you've got a lot of different features that come into this process, and we'll work with your staff to make sure that we've kind of got your questions answered so you have a good, clear picture as to what it is, procedurally that you have in front of it and what legally you can do in front of you.
I think last time we thought we were going to be able to put money into the TexRail project, and then later determined that we could not. I think now, at least what I have heard, is we're maybe not as, set on a fixed rail or maybe even a fixed route project, but might be interested in some sort of a trend. I'm going to be careful about using that word transit, but some sort of a commuter package that would, help the citizens being able to move from point A to point B.
We'll leave this meeting with the thought process of trying to have transportation defined as broadly as it can be defined to make sure that you can encompass as much as you can encompass. There is going to be some sort of line of demarcation where you probably can't cross over there with that single proposition. But as Jonathan alluded to, you have to do these things for specific purposes. You could not put both of those, the office building, for example, and the streets in one proposition. That's just, you can't do multi-purpose propositions. So we'll look at that with the thought process of how broadly we can do that. The thought process, again, being related to how you're going to spend bond proceeds as opposed to spend general county tax dollars. Both those things are going to come from the 80-cent tax, the county levies. So you have that. That's going to be the supporting source.
The what?
The 80-cent tax.
What 80 cents?
The county has taxing authority for up to 80 cents.
Up to 80%. Don't be sitting here talking about us doing an 80-cent
Your tax rate has not gone up,
We ain't
Judge.
been an 80-cent levy in a long time.
I saw the 0.16, so I'm not talking about. I don't want to get knifed in the parking lot on the way
I
out
don't want
here.
anybody to be looking at this and thinking that we got an 80-cent levy out there.
But the point is only that the dollars, the revenue source that you have for operating the counties, whether it be bond proceeds or other things, are generally the same source of dollars, and the amount that you determine in your discretion how that's going to be applied.
The word congestion relief, or the two words congestion relief, sound to me like it could be anything that would get more than one person in a car that is traveling around the metroplex.
I think it's a fair thing to look at and see. For example, can you build an HOV lane in a roadway? I would think, yeah, that's just a lane. You built the roadway. That's the purpose. The use of it is to occupy people with more than one passenger in their car. So a little bit is a little bit of how you're going to define that. If we're talking about rail, that becomes a little trickier, I think, because then you're talking about really two different types of transportation features. But that's not to say we can't figure out some way to at least explore that and see where we can come up. Totally independent of the transportation authority discussion you were just having, because that's really an apple and an orange.
Yeah, and my thought process is, I get if we can't do transit projects, but we have to be thinking of ways that we can get our residents around and not always in a car. And so we do need to think broadly in that. So I look forward to you all coming back and.
My request to our lawyers that are from the Criminal District Attorney's Office and to our bond lawyers has always been, don't tell us what we can't do. Tell us how we can do what it is we want to do.
And the only word I would insert in there is legally.
Yeah, well, that's a given. It's going to be legal.
That goes without saying.
And it is also a process. You know us well enough over the years to know that's kind of our philosophy of trying to figure out ways to get you from point A to point B in a manner that you can do it in a proper fashion that can withstand the Attorney General's review as well as everything else. We're delighted to take that task on, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Any
other questions? Okay. Long way to go, short time to get there.
So we're now going to move to item number E under briefing. This is a report as it relates to the City of Arlington TIF reinvestment zone number 7. Ms. South is here to address the court at this time.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Oops,
Morning,
let's go
Megan.
back.
So, the City of Arlington has established a 1,495 acre tax increment financing reinvestment zone. It's been a long time coming, located in the eastern portion of Arlington. The zone is centered along Pioneer Parkway from Center Street to the city limit boundary, and then to the east, and extends north along 360 to Mitchell Street and south to Arkansas Lane. So the TERS was established to primarily facilitate support for investment and reinvestment along Pioneer Parkway, which is commonly known or referred to in Arlington as the International Corridor. So this TERS is expected to raise the taxable value within the zone from its current value of $972 million to over $2 billion over the 30-year life of the zone. And today we have Bruce Payne with the City of Arlington here to give you an overview of the plans for the Arlington International Corridor TERS. So I'm going to ask him to come up and turn it over. There he is.
Bruce, it's always good to see you. That
You too, sir.
You're still working there. And,
Yeah, still got to work.
hey, man, you know.
That hasn't changed. I lost the clicker. Oh, there it is right there. Okay. Judge Whitley, Commissioners, thank you very much for your time today. As was just mentioned, the city recently formed our TERS number 7, Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone number 7, known as the International Corridor. Conversations with the county about doing this began really back in 2017 when Commissioner Wynn was on the board. And ultimately, we talked to the City Council about the idea of creating a TERS district there that would create the ability to foster new infrastructure projects, et cetera, to do what Commissioner Allen was just talking about, which is to enable the different people living in the zone to be able to maneuver back and forth in that area without necessarily having to drive. Right now, it's a very suburban district. There's really no way to get around easily unless you are driving. Pioneer Parkway is a 6-lane highway. State highway, 60-mile-an-hour speeds in a 45 zone is not uncommon. And so it is certainly a district that could use the help. I will tell you that the original concept of this came out of Houston. They have a pretty vibrant international corridor or zone area that celebrates the ethnic differences between South Asian, Southeast Asian, Southwest Asian, African American, Mexican American cuisines and cultural activities and things such as that. And so the idea was brought to us because the eastern portion of Pioneer Parkway shares a lot of the same sort of elements, and that there was the opportunity to create a zone that would foster pedestrian mobility and new development in that area that celebrates the cultural differences of the area. And so we briefed the City Council on this in 2018. The council was favorable to it and wanted us to move forward with the creation of the new TERS district. And then we agreed with the county to share the cost of the consultant to actually devise the district. And so that's what brings us to today. This is the standard model of what a TERS is that you always see, the triangles. The gray area that is labeled base valuation are the tax revenues that are there today. The participating jurisdictions, in this case would be the county and the city, would keep their base valuation. That would not change, but the new incremental growth over time based on new development, things such as that would be captured by the TERS and would be used for infrastructure projects and related items that help to develop the area further and provide the amenities that I described. At the end of the TERS, this is a 30-year TERS, then the TERS would be dissolved, and then all the new revenues would be distributed back to the participating jurisdictions. And so, as was just mentioned, the TERS district boundaries were established by the consultant. It's a little Swiss cheese-like, if you will, mainly because there's a lot of existing residential development already in the area, and you can only have a certain percentage of residential in the creation of a new TERS. And so it's a large district, as was mentioned. It's almost 1,500 acres in size, and it extends from Center Street on the west end all the way to the Grand Prairie boundary on the east side. So it's a large area and predominantly in East Arlington, some of the older parts of the city. After the analysis of what presently exists out there, the land use map indicates there's quite a bit of commercial in red that you see, and then in the yellow it shows multifamily residential. The map in the lower left shows how many vacant tracts there are, which are not a great deal of vacant tracts, but there certainly is enough to move the needle in terms of valuation in the district and to help accumulate revenues that can be used towards new infrastructure. So the projects that are envisioned in the TERS, and I just wanted to make sure you were aware the City Council created this TERS about 2 months ago, is for infrastructure improvements, which include roadway, water, sewer, drainage, parking improvements to the tune of about $35 million. Additionally, streetscape improvements and beautification at $10 million budgeted. Pedestrian amenities, as I mentioned, at $10 million. Economic development, those would be for miscellaneous assistance for new projects that would be coming in at $5 million. And then any planning, admin, and legal expenses are programmed at $1 million. So the total over the 30 years that potentially could be spent based on what we see out there is at $61 million. The growth of the TERS values is projected about 2% per year, which takes it from $1 billion to $2 billion over the life of the TERS. And then the TERS revenues for the total between the city and the county would be a total of $64.8 million, and then the retained by each jurisdiction would be 27.7.
Bruce?
Yes, sir.
Can I ask you to go back 2 slides? Thank you. Lisa? Recently, we discussed others of these that had things like streetscape improvements and beautification, pedestrian amenities in parks, plaza, open space, that we've had some reluctance to fund. Have you looked at these?
Yeah, historically, we've not done parks, gazebos, and Bruce, you probably
I'm referring to the one that we discussed here a few weeks ago.
So historically, we have done public plaza areas that are part of the multi-use Colleyville, Taylor Street down here when we have done the, when TCC, when it was Radio Shack, that plaza area. There were other plazas that are public gathering places that we have done. What we typically don't do is areas that are recreational parks, or if there's trails, we will do trails that are linkages for pedestrian walkways, especially if they link into the trail system throughout the county. But I think in what you were talking about, Commissioner, we were talking about public art was one of the things in the other.
Public art, water features, beautification issues that we asked them to take out. I remember, there was some.
Well, I believe.
I just want to be consistent.
These are more intersection improvements that are design elements, so it provides a sense of place so that you know you're in this corridor area. Mm-hmm. So it will be, when you're driving, it's part of the roadway improvements and intersections, so it provides areas that say this is an international corridor. It's not so much actual like plazas off-road, amphitheaters, things like that. This is that part of a pedestrian area for the corridor alone.
Okay.
So this slide shows the contribution that we would be requesting of the county. This is what we actually discussed previously. There'd be a 70% of your M&O portion of your budget is what the city and the county are proposed to participate in. That shows the county at 33% and the city at 67% of the total contributions, which is represented by both the circular graph on the left and the vertical graphs on the right to show which jurisdiction is putting in how much funding. So these are some images of some of the existing development. It's a very suburban kind of environment, mainly because of how it developed over time, but these are some of the various ethnic restaurants that exist along there. You can see they're built into different shopping centers. They're standalone buildings. They're, you find them in various available spaces. And the idea is to tie this together in a more pedestrian-friendly environment. This are some images that I took of the existing right-of-way that shows the lack of pedestrian mobility. And as Lisa mentioned a moment ago, these would be improved to accommodate pedestrian movements and things such as that for the entire 3.5 miles of this, from the west end to the east end of this district. So it'd be quite a substantial work over the 30-year period. And I did want to mention that Representative Chris Turner, in conjunction with this project, managed to secure funding for TxDOT to go ahead and build a pedestrian walkway, 5-foot sidewalk with 4-foot parkway, along with signalized pedestrian intersections from Center Street all the way to 360. That's about a $5 million item that he was able to secure for this project, so that TxDOT is going to go ahead and start moving on that. And that'll create essentially a spine, if you will, of pedestrian mobility that then can be plugged into by the new developments that come along. So that is my presentation for you, and I'm available to answer any questions.
We have an audience participation on this. Joanna, please come forward at this time and go ahead and state your name, and you have 3 minutes for comments.
I'm going to try to speak fast. Hi, my name is Joanna Cardoza.
You can take your mask off
Oh.
if you'd like.
Okay.
Certainly, that's up to you.
All right. Ready?
You bet.
Hi, my name is Joanna Cardoza. I live in Precinct 2. I am a businesswoman in the DFW area and an Arlington community advocate. I have the honor of serving on various city, school, and community boards and advisory committees. I'm here today to speak on TERS number 7. I am very concerned with the lack of outreach to the existing community about the TERS, and such as community meetings that are inclusive in multiple languages. TERS number 7 has a high minority Spanish Vietnamese speaking community. I have personally asked for information to be presented in Spanish to Spanish-speaking groups, and the city has not been able to coordinate that. Simply putting in adding the Fort Worth Star-Telegram in an English publication is not enough, and doing outreach to neighborhood associations that are not representative of the community is not enough either. I am the Vice President of Development and Marketing of a local restaurant group. My company and I, just as many small businesses in the area, make business decisions such as site locations based on demographics, residential density, traffic counts, income, and economic drivers of the area. For the city to say during one of their meetings that they reached out to all the businesses in the area is simply not true. My company has not been contacted, and we have several businesses in the area. I have been criticized about being negative, but this is not the case. This is about meeting the needs of the existing community. This is that is heavily invested in it, not about creating a new community to bring in new residents. TERS includes most of the existing workforce housing in that area. During Arlington's comprehensive plan outreach, every single group stated that workforce housing is a major issue in Arlington. I noticed that TERS number 7 says funding will go to affordable housing, but what is affordable housing to Arlington? Most of the housing that has been approved recently has been at market rate luxury or senior housing. TERS number 7 also includes several grocery stores that serve the African American, Arabic, Latino, and some Vietnamese community, and addresses some disparities for that community. When you start talking about redevelopment, my business knows firsthand what a small business can be, that a small business can be taken away from a business owner to make way for new development. The city will also say that neighborhood associations support the TERS number 7, and they do, but they are not representative of the community that they serve. When I have questioned the lack of representation from the diverse community on these neighborhood associations, the reply I got from a member is if I did not think that they could speak for my community. No, they cannot speak for my community. In conclusion, I ask the court slow down the process. Ask the city to go back and actually do proper and inclusive outreach to the community. I ask that my commissioner do the same. Also, in regards to the appointees to TERS number 7 board and the international corridor, why are we appointing people that do not live in the TERS? The TERS number 7 will affect many families, small businesses, and I am just asking the city and the court to create a process that is inclusive of all the community that lives and contributes to the existing economy. And the city has all the information. They know that this area is high Latino. It shows on their maps that it's a high Latino area. It shows that African Americans and Latino communities are struggling to pay rent. So they have all this information. They need to make sure that they're including everyone in that community in this decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cardozo.
Well, Bruce, you didn't have any more to present, did you?
I'm sorry, ma'am?
You didn't have any more to present, right?
No, ma'am, that's all.
Okay. And this is just a briefing item, so, right, Megan?
Right.
Okay.
In anticipation of the agreement.
Of an action.
Participation agreement.
Okay. Well, so what I wanted to add, and I appreciate Ms. Cardoza for advocating for her community. Obviously, we know that she visits court on a very regular basis on a number of issues. And I say, just like with the business, is that the customers that you hear the most from, it tells you how much they care about the work that you're doing and also their expectations. So this area in East Arlington in particular, or the international corridor, really, obviously the conversation with the city and the county specifically precedes my time on the court. But I'm not new to the area nor to the work that's being done in it. And in fact, when Representative Turner started to work on these transportation issues, I was a staffer. I was his transportation staffer. And that was a direct result of attending a neighborhood meeting and where we heard from the community concerns about the speed on Pioneer Parkway. In fact, there have been 2 pedestrian vehicle fatalities within maybe a year or a year and a half. And at that time, what is now the Dan Dipert Recreation Center was Hutch Junior High. But there are so many partners that are working on various efforts within this area. I'm not going to list exactly, what each partner is doing, but it's important for us to all understand how much synergy there is in the area, including Dallas County on the Grand Prairie side, but also the city of Grand Prairie, of course, the city of Arlington, TxDOT, Arlington ISD, the county, Representative Turner's office, and the North Central Texas Council of Governments. So we have had one initial meeting to get all of these governmental entities and other folks, some folks who had been part of the previous iteration of conversations about this together. I'm in the process of putting together a community meeting. We don't have a date set yet, but certainly to Joanna's point, and that I've heard from others, is it needs to be an inclusive process. And so my job is not to make these things happen because obviously there are so many different entities involved, but I do see that I can play a very critical role in being a convener and making sure that the community's voice is heard. So as we move forward, which I've made my expectations clear with Arlington and everybody else, is that we will move forward in that way. But there, again, is just a tremendous amount of synergy in this area. And as has been shared, there's nothing wrong with who lives there or their businesses. This is just a way to enhance and to elevate what the community who has been there for decades has already been doing.
So at this time, we're not being asked to take any action.
No, sir. So if everyone is in agreement, we'll be moving forward and working with the City of Arlington to bring back the tax increment
And when do
participation.
you anticipate bringing it back?
It usually takes a couple of weeks to get it drafted and approved through legal and brought back here.
Don't
We're not
bring it
meeting
back
next week.
so soon that you don't have a chance to do the kinds of outreach that Commissioner Allen and Ms. Cardoza have asked you to do.
Yes, sir.
And if I can add to that, first several months of this year, Arlington City Council had the staff manage a series of conversations with groups generally referred to as our Unity Council, which East Arlington was heavily represented. And they met weekly to talk about all kinds of issues all around the city that were going on that resulted in a collection of this information and a publication of this information that the staff is now integrating into their budgets to accommodate those sorts of concerns. East Arlington, of course, being an older part of the city, has had a lot of discussion, a lot of attention about what it needs. So we're not ignorant to the issues that are out there. But we do think that providing for funding that's going to be necessary to make changes that are positive in the area is going to be necessary, and the TERS is a great vehicle to do that with.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Now we could move to item D under the briefing. This is a update as it relates to the PACE program. And Ms. McMillan is here to address the court at this time.
Good morning, Judge, Commissioners. You may recall back in November of 2017, the county established the PACE, Property Assessed Clean Energy Program, for all of the properties within Tarrant County. So any property in any city within the county can utilize this program, which provides low-cost, long-term financing for energy-efficient renovations to commercial properties. Since that time, in 2019, the Texas PACE Authority, who is our administrator for the PACE program, provided a report on the PACE projects within the county, and at that time we had 4. They were unable to come last year because of COVID, so they're here today to give an update of the projects that we currently have utilizing PACE financing in Tarrant County. So Dub Taylor, the Chief Operating Officer for Texas PACE Authority, is here to give a report.
And you did say that this project is for commercial properties.
Correct. It's for commercial, retail, and residential units of 5 or more, but we don't have any residential projects right now in Tarrant County.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you, Judge, Commissioners. My name is Dub Taylor. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Texas PACE Authority. I think you've heard from our president, Charlene Heidinger, before on this topic. I joined the Texas PACE Authority February of last year after 20 years with the state comptroller, where I ran the State Energy Conservation Office, doing very similar work but public sector. Commissioner, this is in Texas for commercial and industrial properties only, and residential 5 units or more, but not single families. So I'm going to provide a little update here and some background. So a little reminder. So what is PACE in Texas? Again, it's a low-cost means of financing energy and water efficiency projects, 100% financing, including distributed generation projects, commercial, industrial, and multifamily units. And the key to this is it's repaid or secured through a special assessment on the property that runs with the loan. So that provides a lower risk loan product for lenders. They will loan for a longer period of time than they ordinarily would with just a commercial equipment replacement loan. It's authorized under the Texas Local Government Code, Chapter 399, and then enabled city by city, county by county across the state. Tarrant County did that in 2017, November of 2017. And the nature of this program, it's voluntary and open market, meaning that if you're a property owner anywhere within the county's footprint, you can participate in this. If you're a contractor, you can do the work. It's up to the lender, it's up to the owner to decide the contractors they work with, and any lender can provide the financing, so there's no pre-selected list. It's wide open. This is really kind of a mechanism that ties all of that together.
And it's not confined to any particular geographic area. It is project specific around the county.
Countywide, anywhere in the county. So our role, we work with cities and counties to support them and operate their PACE programs. Our organization is a nonprofit. It was created specifically to provide this service for cities and counties. We work with property owners and their capital providers, as well as their service providers, to ensure that the projects they put together conform to all the requirements in state law and then our program guidelines as well. So PACE is really growing in Texas, and many cities and counties are following in the footsteps of Tarrant County. There are now 59 local programs across the state, covering over 60% of the state's population. Most recently, just a week ago, Erath County, southwest of here, adopted its PACE program Monday of last week, the Commissioner's Court. I was there, and in that county, as you can imagine, there's a lot of agricultural activity, and so there's a very large dairy project where they're looking to utilize PACE to upgrade systems in a dairy that result in greater energy and water efficiency. So growing, and we have several more in the pipeline. Go back one, sorry about that. Also on the projects as well, a number of projects continue to increase, $155 million of investment to date statewide through PACE. And as you can see on the bar chart, those numbers are growing. The yellow bar, sort of in the middle, that's the 2019 number. In 2019, there was actually more dollar volume of transactions statewide than in any prior year. In fact, as much that year as any of those years prior combined. And then COVID hit, and we weren't sure what was going to happen. But in 2020, we actually had more individual transactions close, but smaller dollar amounts. So understandably, a lot of owners were trying to understand what was going to happen, how their properties might be used going forward. But still a fair amount of activity. And then we have quite a bit this year. So the growth trend continues. A lot of this is in the commercial and retail space, hospitality. And in terms of the types of projects that have been completed, about half have been focused on energy efficiency, energy savings, about a third on water conservation, and then the balance on distributed energy systems. And why is this a good match for commercial property owners? If you look at that red line that I've put the arrow toward, that is electricity consumption in the commercial building sector really since 1950. And what you can see there, these are numbers from the U.S. Department of Energy. 75% of the electricity generation in the U.S. is used to heat, cool, light buildings, provide lighting for buildings, and now increasingly serve plug load as we're plugging more and more things into the buildings. Of course, that's a factor of we've got more commercial office space than ever, and that trend continues. But also a lot of that is in areas like where we are in Texas, in the Southwest, where we're air conditioning, 9 months out of the year, 10 months out of the year, and heating. And of course, we all know that because of February. So increased demand. Overall, commercial buildings represent 50% of all U.S. energy consumption. So big opportunity there. Some of the trends, too, we're seeing in the commercial real estate sector, and this was even pre-COVID, but owners were looking to repurpose and reposition their buildings. Maybe it was an office building before, and maybe it is going to be a hotel, or it's going to be mixed use. And so PACE can be used in part for projects like that to address some of the mechanical systems. Also, a number of companies now have corporate commitments around environmental, social, and governance issues. So commitments to reduce energy impacts, water impacts, things like this. PACE can be used to retrofit projects to meet some of those commitments. And then I think our heightened awareness now created by COVID on general health conditions inside our built space. So touchless systems, motionless sensors on water fixtures and restrooms, motion sensors on lighting, things like this also can have energy and water savings benefits. So you can implement a health upgrade project sort of indirectly in some cases through PACE as well. So here in Tarrant County, and this is the web page for Tarrant County that we host for you. If you click onto that page, it's like a little ticker. All of these numbers kind of move up, and this is what it looks like when it's done. So 8 projects here, about $25 million of investment, over 300 jobs created. This is construction, obviously, that creates jobs, but in some cases we have some hotels, some lodging. So these are hospitality facilities that weren't there before. The PACE project, in part, has now enabled that building to turn into a hotel, which provides permanent jobs for people who work there. Emissions reductions, water savings, energy savings, very considerable. And let's look at the projects themselves. In the hospitality group, a couple here that we've highlighted over in Grapevine, Hilton Garden Inn. This is a building that is, I believe, about a 1980s, 1990s vintage. Buildings of that era, typically their mechanical systems are at the end of their useful life. Oftentimes they're creating maintenance headaches in addition to using more energy and water than they should. So those are great candidates for PACE. The Sinclair and then the Kempton here in Fort Worth. There you have historic properties that are being converted to hotels that are really, sort of this trend with boutique hotels that many of the chains, the larger chains have. They want something unique. They just want to, not just another box, but let's do what we can to revive these buildings and take advantage of state-of-the-art technology for mechanical systems as part of that. Office buildings over in Bedford. Again, this is sort of, the 80s, 90s vintage buildings where there's an opportunity to replace the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, building control systems, reduce heat gain through window tinting on the windows, lighting improvements, and then in Fort Worth Sterling Building, again, HVAC and lighting. That's a pretty common thing you see in commercial office buildings of this era. And then in the nonprofit, kind of a mixed group here. The Historic Isis Theater here, it's been under the project underway for a while. There you're taking a facility that has not been in use. You're bringing it back up to kind of state of the art in terms of technology, putting it back into use, but improving the overall operations. ACH Child and Family Services Center, again, that HVAC lighting, insulation, roof improvements. And then the New Birth Baptist Church solar project, rooftop solar project that they wanted to implement there, that falls into the distributed generation category. So nonprofits are certainly eligible. Resources, all of this and more is on our webpage. A couple of things that are new. We're about to offer an online contractor training. So if you're a contractor or a lender or you want to in some way be involved in the PACE program, your time is valuable. You don't want to go to a workshop necessarily. We're going to have a self-paced online training where you can go through that, test out, get a certification, and that will allow you to be listed on our webpage as a contractor or a lender or service provider that knows what PACE is about. Our case studies are there, and then we also have a new searchable service provider directory, so you can search by lenders, by contractors, and there's a process for being listed there if you're interested. The one thing I didn't highlight here, and this is sort of in its early stages, but the North Central Texas Council of Governments is looking at potentially creating a region-wide PACE program where cities and counties could opt into that to provide administrative support for their program. For programs that already exist, like here in Tarrant County, you can continue to operate yours as you do independently, or you could decide to opt in to a regional program if that's created at some point. So that's also something that's going on right now. And it may be a while, it may be a year or more before the COG decides if that makes sense for them to do or not. So in summary, PACE is really, it's a win-win-win. Property owners can improve their assets, reduce their energy and operating costs. For contractors, oftentimes they'll develop a scope of work for an owner. It has a big price tag. How do you get past that? This is a way of financing that. For lenders, it's a low-risk loan product secured by an assessment. At the state level, why did all this start through state authorization? Well, part of it is to reduce demand on our utility infrastructure, and we're reminded of that each day. Certainly in February we were for several days. I know I was at my house, and here recently last week with the warnings we get from ERCOT about peak demand and reducing our demand. Well, you can, I guess there's one way of thinking about that. You can conserve as an action, and you can do without. You can turn your thermostats up, your lighting off. That's important. But by implementing these energy efficiency and water efficiency measures, you can do with, but do it more efficiently and have the same impact. So it helps support that.
Would you explain the tax assessment lien position, please?
Yes, sir. So when a owner decides to utilize the PACE program, what they're agreeing to is a senior lien on their property that secures the loan. So it's not a direct tax assessment that's collected through the assessor's office and then remitted, but it is a similar process done contractually. So in some states, it is a line item that's added to the tax bill. In Texas, that was really something that the tax assessors were concerned about, having to reprogram their systems for sort of one-off projects. But it's a similar mechanism. So there's a lien that is placed on the property at the owner's request that secures the loan for a period of time longer than a lender would typically want to make an equipment loan. That's really the key to it.
And isn't it senior to the, it's not senior to the first lien mortgage, is it?
It is senior. It's considered a super senior lien. So in the event of a project that already has a mortgage, there is a requirement that that mortgage holder provide consent. So if they're,
Right.
So
Well, I
that's.
knew that there was something that allowed the mortgage lender to be comfortable with the project.
Yes, sir. And about half the projects in Texas have had mortgages and have required consent. And so those mortgagees, those mortgage holders have provided consent on those projects. And then of course, right where the rubber meets the road at the community level, this is an economic development tool. This allows owners to reinvest in their properties. It allows, creates local jobs in the community. And again, has general, sort of community improvement and aesthetics benefits. So I'll stop there. That's really what I wanted to brief you on today. My contacts here, and also I wanted to introduce in the back, Autumn Bradle. Autumn has joined our team just this month, and she lives here in Tarrant County. Oh. So you may be seeing her more often as she's just down the street.
Thank you.
Happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Again, I remember when we were laboring to get this program started, and it has worked out. And those buildings, several of those buildings that you just mentioned, just came on recently. Sinclair, Kempton.
Kempton's been open about 2 weeks.
Yep. So it's been a very good program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, members of the court, if we can now go to the administrator section. We're going to start our process. We're going to ask Ms. South to come up, and we're going to do item number 1.
Maybe we're going to have about a 5-minute recess.
Sounds good.
Come on down, Megan.
I've already presented, so we're good.
Good.
See y'all in a couple of weeks.
Next.
That was your favorite presentation.
I know y'all just love it.
Certainly our favorite.
Just stay awake for it. Okay, so I will, as I have done in the past couple of weeks, I will be extremely brief. I just want to touch on a couple of points. I'll be happy to answer any questions. The presentation's in your red folders. I did want to mention that a few weeks ago, I had noted that the ERAP payments had reached the 1 million mark. So I am happy to report that yesterday, Kristen's team was notified that they have now exceeded the 2 million mark.
Excellent.
Yes, sir.
I said excellent.
Good, yes. Yes, they're doing a wonderful job. So, quick update for vaccinations this week. Things are slowing down with them, as Vinny's been noting the past several weeks. But the Tim Curry location, that location did close last Thursday, and then also the White Settlement Splash Days location is complete. It ended on Saturday. Both were pretty successful. They did a good job. Vinny is going to get up here in a minute, and I know that he's probably going to present a little bit more specific information and talk a little bit more in detail about that Sundance Square location. We extended it and opened it this past Saturday, and I think the numbers were fairly small. And then as for the vaccination sites moving forward, I know UNT, we talked about that. They're moving away from vaccination sites into the mobile pop-up model. They are continuing to partner with MedStar to offer the in-home vaccinations to the homebound individuals. And then I know that there's some information included in all of your packets related to specific site schedules for UNT and their mobile site schedule as well. And then Vinny can go into more detail if needed about the regular Tarrant County sites. So that's all I have for this week, and I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have them. If not, enjoy your break next week.
Thank you, Megan.
So at this time, we're going to ask Mr. Tenasia to come forward and do his emerging health issues presentation.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, and members of the court.
Femi?
We'll quickly breeze through our briefing here. So 262,000 cases. I believe we are going to add about 130 or so this morning. 559 deaths. A little bit of a plateau happening. We're not declining. I think we're perking up a little. Hospitalizations have been trending up for the last 2 weeks. So I usually rely on a 2-week trend change.
What's happening in Parker County? It wasn't that color last week.
Yes, sir, it wasn't, but I looked. They only have 6 people in the hospital. Their capacity is so low. I think their total bed capacity is only about 80. So that's the issue.
Think about the great job you've done in Kaufman.
Yes, sir. On the hospitalizations, though, 2 weeks ago we hit a low. I think we were at 91 people in the hospital. As you can see, that's turned around back up. 112 in the hospital. That's 2.54%. Now, in the big scheme of things, that's alone by itself is not a big concern, but just the turning of the indicator is a little worrisome. The trauma service area E remains pretty stable. I think they've been in that 300 range, so it's not a major difference. But one thing to note, of all the counties, Tarrant County currently has the most people hospitalized, 112. Dallas is a close second, 101. So just a little concerned that we're the lead in that, unfortunately. Trend overall is looking still, downwards. The data continues to show a downward trend, but some things are starting to turn up. Positivity rate, we hit a low of 2-point-some%, and now we're, for the last 2.5 weeks, trending back up. We're at a 3% range. Our influenza, and I'll go into those details, the influenza-like illness is up again, and then the COVID illness is sort of flat. The case rate, which I was really hoping would continue to decline, and we had hit a low of 22 per 100,000. We're back up a little to 25 per 100,000. So again, not sounding any kind of alarm bells, just a little concerned that we've quit going down, and we'd love to just keep going down and not have to deal with this. So here's a quick look at the Texas trend. So we're not alone. Texas is seeing something similar happen overall. Here's the positivity rate, because that's where the testing is happening. As you can see, there's a clear turn in trend on the positivity rate. It is not high by any means. They're still below 5% mark, but it's decidedly turned up over the last 3 weeks. So post-Memorial Day, and then all the restrictions being lifted and so forth, it is having an impact. We're seeing that in the data. So going back real quick, we talked about the influenza-like illness being up unseasonably. Last week I mentioned we finally found a reason why that is up. There's an outbreak of respiratory syncytial virus happening all across the southern states. So here's some more clarity on that information. Now that y'all are familiar with the positivity rates and all those concepts, you can see a very high positivity rate coming on both PCR and antigen testing. We're shooting through the sky here on these, and it's very unfortunate because it causes a pneumonia-like illness for young kids and elderly. Kids across Texas are getting hospitalized with this illness. And it was a little late to catch because physicians weren't even thinking about RSV because it's so off-season. But now that the HAN alert's been issued, people are paying a little bit more attention, and we're seeing the data come through. So
is there
what
a
should go ahead.
fatality rate with RSV?
So the rate, I don't know, but nationally there's about, I believe, 14,000 or so deaths reported every year on average. And that is if it's a normal season, which every year in the winter season we see RSV a lot, especially like daycares and young kids suffer a lot through that.
Yeah.
Okay. Epidemiologically, why is this happening now?
So CDC is thinking that all year last year we were all wearing masks, so it was very low. RSV was almost non-existent. We had very few cases, and now that all the restrictions have been lifted, especially in the southern states, we caught the tail end of the season with those restrictions being lifted, and so we've just kind of gotten into an unseasonable outbreak. People mixing and mingling together, vacationing, all those type of things. It should calm down. This virus does not like hot weather. So as things heat up, we should be able to get a seasonal benefit.
It don't get much hotter.
I know. Well, you know, public health distancing measures worked, and now we're kind of seeing the sort of the backlash coming out of people mingling together. Okay, so what can we do? It works for RSV, it works for COVID, it works for flu. These measures do work. Again, if you're not vaccinated, continue to take all the precautions, wear a mask, especially in a mixed gathering, and then, of course, choose activities wisely. 4th of July is coming up, very, very important. We've talked about a surge in the Delta variant happening over the last few weeks. Tarrant County numbers are low, but I'm presenting that with a little caution. Not every test gets further studied for variants. So we've only found 4 or 5, but that just tells you it's here. CDC has done larger scale studies. Region 6 for the federal HHS that covers multiple states, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas. I mean, it's a big area. 12.5% of the samples that they're studying are coming positive for the Delta variant. So we're no exception. We're in Texas. We're in that region. Again, a word of caution. We're seeing a little bit of an uptick in activity heading into a 4th of July holiday. If you're not vaccinated, please pay attention. Use all the measures that we know work. If you're vaccinated, you're back to normal. As you can see, it's all green, no masks needed. But if you're in mixed company, let's all use precautions. So a little bit of a West Nile update. So season's here. We've had a few traps, mosquito traps that are tested positive. It's in the box in the little beige color. We've had a lot of activity in the Grand Prairie area, and the reason I keep mentioning that's how it started in 2012, so I get worried. But that data also has an asterisk because Grand Prairie is split between 2 counties, but they're a city, so a lot of the samples come to us. So once you deep dive, you might see that there's some over in Dallas County area, but same vicinity. So about 8 or 10 samples that have tested positive. When you look at the charts below, the thing to see on this chart is the red bars or the pinkish bars. They are how many mosquitoes that are the right kind being found in traps. So the right type of mosquito is being found in abundant quantities. The good news is they're not very infected right now. So that's good, right? I mean, we don't want it. But as you can see, the data shows typically that infectivity starts jumping around 4th of July. So we're heading into it. So what should we do? Again, wear DEET spray when you're outdoors. And outdoor events are going to happen already. Graduations, birthday parties, all those type of things are happening. Wear long sleeves clothes. Empty standing water on your property because that's breeding ground. And as rains happen and now we're hot weather, water gets warm, and that's where mosquito breeding occurs very rapidly. So prevent those mosquito breeding grounds on your property, take care of your own property, and continue to wear DEET when you're outside. Another sort of an outbreak scenario happening, the kissing bug related issues are percolating in Texas this season because of all the rains and everything. So we've talked about the last few times about the sprays that you can put on your yard, the cutter and all those type of things. They help kill the mosquitoes. They help kill the ticks. Use those liberally this season so that we don't have another outbreak of any kind happening here. So a lot of different messages, but they're all tied to health and safety heading into 4th of July. There are a few things that we know that they work. Let's do them this year.
Okay, so kissing bugs, that's not a scientific term, right? Like, what are, I don't get that.
I'd have to get the entomologist to come up and explain all of that.
I took entomology, and you thought I remember that. But.
Yeah, I don't.
Okay.
There's a lot of different things. The point is, those bug sprays, they work on all kinds of stuff. Let's use them very liberally this year. Okay, so quick vaccine update. Again, this growth of vaccinated effort in our community is a little slow but steady. 32% of our community is vaccinated with at least one dose, and 27% have completed their series. Now, Megan mentioned that we've had a variety of different sites. I took out that scheduling slide because we're sort of, now there's like one-day pop-ups here and at a school and so forth. But we did have a additional day at the Sundance Square, so we were going Fridays only. This last Saturday, we added a Saturday. Now, we expected a big crowd. There was a crowd, but they weren't very willing to get vaccinated. We only got about 8 people who were willing to get vaccinated. So it was kind of a slow day compared to what we've been seeing on Fridays. Typical Fridays at Sundance have been about 50, 55. This last Friday was about 40 people. So we're starting to see that tail end effect. We were going to be there about 6 weeks, so it's starting to decline.
I would not read anything into the small number of people who got vaccinated at Sundance Square this past Saturday.
Yes, sir.
People were busy doing other things.
Correct.
I would give Sundance Square another Saturday or two to see if it does not become more productive.
Sure. We are planning to be there this Friday and Saturday as well. The following week, currently we're only scheduled for Friday, given that it's a holiday weekend. Same kind of thing. People will be there, but not necessarily looking to get stuck with a needle. So we'll come back after that and look at the data again and see how all that goes. So that's the update on the vaccines. Real quick, the sign-ups are slow, really slow. Some days we're getting 50, 60 people to sign up, but it's still ongoing. And then here's just a quick update on where all the vaccine that has been delivered, how has it been distributed. So all the different age groups and race ethnicity data is all here. So I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Vinny, I know we're not through it, but I would like for us, maybe in the next 3 to 4 weeks, to set up a kind of a, let's recap what happened over the last year, bring in our, for example, our Monday calls where we included the United Way and a bunch of agencies, as well as a call with our cities and our schools, and really sit down and say, okay, how did we do this last year, year and a half? What could we have done better? What should we do in the future? And really kind of do a recap. And I think it needs to be, in some sort of, on a work session, because we had, I think, one of our successes was our collaboration. But I really want to bring the court members and everybody around the table and say, okay, let's do a tabletop review, and what should we or could we have done differently that might have made it more effective. And I'd like for us to try to do that in the next month or so, just because, we're seeing a lot of, different strains come out, variants. And, there's a little question in my mind that in a year we're going to be looking for vaccines again and an annual type of a deal. And so I'd like to see how we can better approach this and go forward. And if this thing does pop back up, I want to know if there's any ways we should be approaching it differently.
Yes, sir. And I'll make a quick comment. I know you carry that message well. The public should be aware that there are variants and things can happen, but the ultimate message is let's get vaccinated, because then you can quit worrying about all this other sciencey stuff, right? I mean, what should we do as people? Get vaccinated. That's the ultimate message.
And I think that's, I don't know that, I just want us to bring our partners and the people we've worked with this past year and say, what could we have done differently?
Yes, sir.
And just, sit down and see what ideas and what suggestions everybody has.
I would agree. I would be probably concerned about the timeline, though, as I know that we're working through all this ARPA stuff. Just so from a capacity standpoint, and depending on the depth of the conversation and kind of what we want to get out of it, we may have to push it back a little bit. So.
Well, and I hear what you're saying, but I don't want to push it back too much.
Sure.
And the ARPA, what's going to happen, in my opinion, is that we're going to be, once we select the firm to do the needs assessment, they're going to be off doing a needs assessment, and I think that's an opportunity for us to sit down, bring folks together, and maybe at least discuss, because it may very well be that what comes out of the needs, or what comes out of our review, might also spur some expenditures as it pertains to preparing for what I hope will be a 100-year event in 100 years.
Yeah, good point.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, one more audience participant.
Yes, we do.
COVID.
And I will call Mr. Bucher at this point in time. Looks like I had 2 calls while I was on here, but I missed them.
Were you expecting your
I wasn't expecting anybody to call in, but I probably missed an opportunity. I probably won something, and I missed the opportunity to claim my prize.
or an extended warranty?
Mr. Bucher, this is Judge Whitley, and we are at that time on our agenda for your participation. You know the routine.
Yes, sir. Okay, as far as continuing on with the vaccines and all that, I think it's about time that we start looking at reallocating them to maybe looking at the possibility of any clinics that want to take them. I mean, I know keeping our free clinics to continue to get the jab out, obviously that's something we got to look into, but maybe start giving them to the doctors and letting the patient and the doctor decide if they need to give it to them so we can start cutting costs, because it's not looking too good from some of the budgets and some of the allocations that we're having to sit here and sell off, especially some of the collateral. It's kind of astronomical numbers. When you start maybe looking at taking some of that money and sending it back to I guess paying off these loans that I've been seeing coming across. I mean, even looking at the rentals and stuff that the buildings, look at the ones we own and start utilizing the money in that direction instead of taking the money that we're getting from the coronavirus. I mean, even at $618 million, I mean, what are we going to do with that? What can we possibly do with that? If we just continue to keep it open, we shouldn't have to worry about all that money. Maybe, take the portion of it and send the other portion back for people that are trying to keep from getting evicted. That's something I think we really, really need to look forward to. And we need to start looking at, what's the deal with the FEMA, and why do we have, a COVID shelter? I mean, things like this we're looking at, and we don't even see, why we even need a COVID shelter. And, things that we really need to look at beyond the coronavirus and the vaccines, as why as municipalities possibly loaning money to Panther Island when it's a federally funded thing. There's so many questionable issues that we're having within the corona and without the corona, even down to the Ryan Watts 8 Foundation. Why are we even messing with corona on there? There's not much we can do there. Just continue to get the federal funding that's allocated directly for the Ryan Watts 8 and try to find that cure, if that's ever going to be a possibility, which I hope it would be. And I mean, even looking at Dallas, we should just distance ourselves with everything that they got going on, all the chaos that they have. We just need to kind of say, hey, you know what, Tarrant County, we need to focus on getting it built back up, and then maybe possibly in the future get back into dealing with them. But I don't see the long-term dealing with any of that money towards dam funding through anything, whether it be the North Central Texas Council of Governments. I would kind of distance myself at this point with them. So I'm just saying that we need to start looking beyond the corona and start scaling back and scaling all the money we're utilizing for the advertisements and start just, stepping back away from it, because we're already where we're at. We're plateaued or flatline, and it's not going to get any more or any less. And that's just kind of the only comments I have on that.
All right. Thank you, sir. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you.
Members of the court, we have 2 additional items under our section. If we can go to item number 2, we're requesting That the Commissioners Court concur and approve with actions of the Hospital District Board of Managers and approve a commercial lease agreement between the district and Adder Felix Limited Partnership as it relates to the lease of a warehouse located at 100 East Felix Street in Fort Worth, Texas.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. So let me ask a question. I knew that we had something in our policy that basically said if they had a construction project that was over a certain level, that they would bring that to the court for our approval before they could proceed.
Right, $250,000.
But this being a lease, why is that coming to us?
You know, Judge, it's not just a construction project. There's some other elements in that order, and I'll be more than happy to go look at that. But this is not the first time we've seen something like this.
Well, I understand that, but I'm just saying.
Anything related to real estate.
Was it anything related to real estate? Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Finally, members of the court, we're requesting that the Commissioners Court approve amendment to the ILA for municipal direct expense funding between Tarrant County and the town of Edgecliff Village. This will allow them to finalize the expenditure of their CRF funding.
Move approval.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, members of the court.
Thank you. Ms. Tidwell?
We have 3 items for your consideration this morning. The first is to receive and file the quarterly investment report for the period ended March 31st, 2021.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
And our next item, I don't know, can I do both of these together since they're the same thing? They're listed as separate items. Just curious. The next item then would be to receive and file the Tarrant County financial statements for the month of March 2021 and for the month of April 2021.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passed unanimously. Marvin, come on down.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hey, Marvin.
So Facilities has the approval of real property lease with Mercantile Partners for office space lease located at 4708 Mercantile Drive in Fort Worth, and this is for the Public Health Department.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
I know we have talked about moving all the little white things and the distance markers and stuff like that, because we've said we were going to open the courtroom back up, or we were going to have employee recognition next month. Is there anything that is wrong with going ahead and, does anyone have objections to going ahead and pulling the white stuff and beginning to open the courts and our buildings back up between now and, because we voted to kind of do it, so.
I don't have a problem with it.
One of the
I
judges,
think we should, at the same time, encourage people to wear a mask. We can't require them to do it, but we can encourage them to do it.
if the unvaccinated ones,
Well,
I think that's always, I agree with you, and I would hope that would always be the case. I also had a call from one of the judges, because they're now starting to have court proceedings again, and with the, distance markers in the elevators, it's next to impossible to get the people on the floors from the lobby up into the court areas in any kind of a organized.
Pull it up.
fashion. Pull them up.
Well, I had shared my concerns last week, and I would add that, especially when it comes to employee recognition, that I wouldn't want for an employee who is either not vaccinated or is not comfortable attending to feel as though they can't come to be recognized. Obviously, that's, personal choice, but we should be sure that we're considering all employees who may want to attend to be recognized, so.
Okay, I mean, anybody can wear a mask.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I'm not sure what you're saying. Because, I mean, if we can only make it one day, and so we've got 100-something people.
Well, I mean, just as Commissioner Burke said, we need to make sure that we're still encouraging for people to attend as safely as possible, so.
Okay.
And then people can make the choices to whether or not that they do in fact want to attend.
I agree.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, let's take the white stuff, let's take the seat blockers off.
Got it.
Go for it.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Ms. Glenn?
Move to receive and file personnel agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the personnel agenda. Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ms. Glenn.
We have a few more items for the court this morning. Item number 2, we're asking the court to approve our fiscal year 2022 holiday schedule. So this schedule should look familiar with one change. So this is the schedule that you all approved last year. The one change is that we've added for the court's consideration the Juneteenth holiday. Of course, the court is aware that the Juneteenth holiday is now a federal holiday. So again, this is for your consideration. If this is something that you'd like to approve, then just as a reminder, this would then take our schedule from 12 paid holidays to 13 paid holidays.
I'll move approval of that.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. My only thing is that the last time we added one, we took one away and we lost Columbus Day.
Yes, sir.
And, you know, I don't have a problem adding Juneteenth, but I would like for us to not end up adding another day to our paid holidays. And I'm looking down here and trying to figure out which, if any.
Good luck.
About the only one where I'm, you know, where at least I'm not going to have a live person come and get me is President's Day.
I disagree with that.
So you're willing to go to 13?
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I have a problem with going to 13. That's my only thing. And I would offer up to eliminate
Christmas?
Yeah, well, I'm not quite that brave. I'm not quite that brave. And I sure like that Friday after Thanksgiving.
You're having the struggle that we had, Judge.
Well, I agree, and I'm going to suggest that the one that I would take off would be President's Day. And that's what I would suggest, is taking President's Day off.
It's not part of my motion.
I recognize it's not part of your motion. That's why I'm going to vote against your motion. But I wanted everybody to understand why I'm voting against it from that perspective. So any other discussion?
I wanted you to make a motion.
Well, I can't because there's
See
already
if
one.
you could get a second.
Well, I probably couldn't, but there's a motion on the floor at this point in time, so.
Okay.
We'll vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-1.
Thank you. So item 3, we're asking for a waiver of terminal benefits for public health. Mr. Tanasia is requesting a waiver effective July 3rd for 384 vacation hours related to the departure of a microbiologist. We're estimating the net cost to the public health fund will be approximately $19,800, including fringe benefits.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Our next item will take a little bit more discussion. We're asking the court to approve leave and pay options related to COVID-19. We've been before you a few times to discuss how we'd like to move forward with regard to pandemic leave. And just to recap briefly, at the end of 2020, at the end of last year, all of the federally mandated COVID leave expired. We came to you, and the court decided that it wanted to continue pandemic leave into this year. And so what we have in place is up to 2 paid weeks of time for employees who qualify. That approval ends at the end of this month. And so the question that we have today is, how would the court like to move forward with regard to pandemic leave? Now, page 2 of your handout, just to remind you, gives you the categories that qualify employees for pandemic leave. There are four areas primarily. So if the employee is asked to quarantine because there's a concern that there's been an exposure to COVID, that's one of the ways that an employee can qualify for pandemic leave. If you are caring for an individual who is under quarantine, that would qualify you as well. If there is a quarantine that is issued by a governmental entity, that would qualify you. And then finally, if you are an employee who has a child who is in child care or daycare, and that daycare is no longer available or closed, then that will qualify you for pandemic leave. And if I didn't say this, let me take a step back and say that with the 2 weeks of pandemic leave, employees receive 100% of their base pay. So it's fully paid, the employee is not harmed in any way, and obviously the thought is the employee then is able to recover, not expose their coworkers to COVID or the potential of COVID, and then return to work. So that's the situation we have currently. One additional thing, we do have leave in place beyond the 2 weeks for employees with child care issues. And if the court recalls, in that case, employees are eligible for an additional 10 weeks at 2/3 their base pay. Now, they can opt for 100% of their pay, but they'd have to use their own paid leave in that instance. So that's what we have in place currently. The question today is, after the month of June, after this month, then what you've put in place expires. I want to give you 2 additional data points before you make your decision about whether or not you'd like to continue pandemic leave. And that is, we have seen a fairly significant decline in the number of requests that we're receiving and in what we're paying out in pandemic leave. So just to give you some perspective, in January we paid out around $343,000. And again, that would be employees in all of the categories that I just addressed. In contrast, in the month of June, this month so far, we paid out $34,000. So again, a fairly significant decrease in requests that we're getting for pandemic leave, but not non-existent. We still have people who are requesting pandemic leave.
Can we pay this benefit out of ARPA funds or some of the other federal dollars that we've got?
Nobody's rushing to the podium, so I don't know the answer to that question.
I don't see why not.
Will you repeat those figures again, please?
Yes, ma'am. So in the month of January, we paid out, actually the exact amount is $343,096. That was in January. In June, we paid out $34,109. And one additional data point, during the legislative session, quarantine.
Russell, you better be listening to this.
Yeah, Russell actually we had this discussion yesterday, so he's listening. So during the legislative session, there was a bill that was passed that would provide paid quarantine leave for jailers and other individuals who are in the care and custody or who are responsible for care and custody of inmates. And so that is to say that is in effect currently. Obviously, those individuals are being addressed through the pandemic leave policy that we have in place for everybody. But you should know, again, it's just an additional data point. We are going to, and we are required to pay what's called quarantine paid leave to that group of employees. So, currently.
That bill did pass.
Yes.
And he signed it in.
Russell tells me that it was signed into law and it was effective immediately.
Okay.
So we will have that obligation. The question is, what do we do with regard to our other employees? Now, I'm sorry, Mr. Manius, what's proposed for your consideration is to continue pandemic leave through the end of this fiscal year, through the end of September, and that would give us an opportunity, of course, to continue to track the numbers. We would hope, of course, that we can continue to see declines in requests, but I mean, obviously, that's not information that any of us have at this time.
And this would treat our other employees in at least somewhat of a similar fashion to how the state has said we will treat our jailers.
Somewhat, I think, is the right description, Judge,
yes.
Because
it's not exact.
It's not exact because with pandemic leave, again, what we have in place would be up to 2 weeks. Now, it's my understanding from Russell that with this paid quarantine leave, that it would be for the duration of the quarantine. And Russell will correct me if I've said something incorrect.
We don't believe that we can use ARPA funds to pay for the requests that Ms. Glenn is talking about. We have not used CARES Act funds in the past to pay for those other expenses either. So we have not used any of those two revenue sources.
I would like a definitive answer on whether some of these pots of federal money can be used to pay for these leaves.
Okay. I agree, because it would seem to me very logical that if we're giving, quarantine leave, and we're required to do it because of the pandemic, that should qualify for ARPA or CARE funds.
And the actual language in the actual.
ARPA, let me just clarify one thing. We're going to be talking here shortly about ARPA, but ARPA is very different than the CARES, and it has very specific things that are allowed, and it doesn't actually talk about any of the things that were under the CARES Act. It talks about infrastructure and revenue loss and some other very specific items. And so they're really not the same at all. They're federal relief funds, that's why we're calling them that. But the CARES was related to the pandemic, and ARPA is related to the four broad categories that they gave us. And that's not pandemic.
And I would just say one additional thing. The actual bill, Judge, that addresses the paid quarantine leave actually makes reference to communicable diseases, and so it's not pandemic specific. I just wanted to make sure that we were clear about that, or I'm clear about that.
But ours is pandemic specific.
What I'm asking you about today, yes, sir, would be whether or not you all want to continue the pandemic leave for a period of time, or do we feel like we've done what we should have done. And again, the court has been very generous. The federally mandated leave ended in December of last year. So we're 6 months past that.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are other ways where we've been limited in how we can protect our employees and also protect the public. So I would move that we extend it as recommended through September 30th, 2021.
I would second that motion.
Okay, just 1 second. Fiscal year or calendar year was what you were asking?
What's proposed is fiscal year.
Okay.
Proposed for your consideration.
But I still want to know if there is some pot of federal money that we can use to pay for this leave.
I don't disagree.
For these leaves.
Mary Louise?
So I just want to say, I want to echo Tina, this court has been very generous and we've taken care of our employees. For us, the last time we had this offered to us, I think 17% of our employees used that time. So I am very comfortable not extending it for our organization at least. So we have really brought it down to less than 17% of 174 employees had to use this. And we have some that are just not getting vaccinated and they don't want to, and I respect that. But for me, if this went away, I think we would be fine as an organization.
Yeah, I'm kind of the opinion that I agree with Commissioner Brooks. I can't understand why, and maybe Will explain it to me in a minute, why ARPA funds can't be used or CARE funds can't be used. CARE funds, I guess, are through. But we do have some unrestricted money. Notice how I said that? Mm-hmm. Unrestricted money that we might be able to utilize toward that end. But I hear where Mary Louise is coming from. Also,
I'm agnostic as to what you call the pot of money.
Yeah.
I just want you to be able to find a pot of money that we can use for this.
And I'm very close to getting it back to the point that this should be paid time off. As it is with everything else, and this is just another, but I'm not quite there yet, and that's why I'm going to be willing to go forward at least to the end of the fiscal year and maybe even until the end of the calendar year. Any other discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Our next two items, items 5 and 6. Item 5, we're asking the court's approval for a double fill and a waiver for the auditor's office. Ms. Tidwell's assistant payroll manager is leaving county service at the end of July. And Ms. Tidwell is requesting a double fill for 1 month to allow for, of course, appropriate transition, as well as approval to waive 400 vacation hours effective August 1st. We are looking at a cost to the general fund of approximately $35,332, including fringe benefits.
Move approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second. And the only comment that I would make is that we're fixing to be asking a whole lot more of our auditor's office as we move into ARPA. Mm-hmm. And I think it's going to be absolutely critical that we get additional folks in here to assist. And we've lost some good people over there over the last year or so. And so I'm just kind of saying that, Renee, just to say I feel a little bit of the pain I think you're feeling.
Thank you, because, we've had a lot of people retire and longer-term employees, and we have several more yet to retire, plus the addition of the responsibility for the $300 million extra money that we have right now, with $200 million more to come next year. So it's a lot of money.
That's why I'm supporting this as a first step toward getting her some of the relief that she needs.
I'm just telling you, the workload mountain.
It's a really small staff to start out with, so when you're missing a key person out of the 5 key people that we have, it's really troubling. So yes, thank you.
The workload hill is becoming a workload mountain. So, any other discussions? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
And our last item for the court is also a request for a double fill and a waiver. This request is from JP4 Judge Gregory. Has an administrative court clerk retiring at the end of July. His request is double fill for 3 weeks, as well as a waiver of 400 vacation hours effective August 1st. We're estimating a cost to the general fund of right at $18,000. That does include fringe benefits.
I thought my motion covered both of these.
JD, now that you say that, I understand, but I don't think the court realized that. So let's go ahead and take this one as an individual.
What did you say?
I think he just said move approval. Do we have a second?
Second?
Okay, we have a motion, a second, discussion. Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Vinnie?
Public Health has one item for your consideration. We're requesting approval for the Public Health Medicaid 1115 waiver intergovernmental demonstration year 10 Texas transfer payment to Texas Health and Human Services Commission. I believe we're sending up about $4.7 million of the match dollars, and we're expecting back at the end of July about $14.7 million.
Move for approval?
Second.
We have a motion, a second, any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Melissa? Man, if Jack was here, I'd be talking to him about his Razorback.
Oh, man, that was sad what happened in baseball. They were doing so well. Okay, good afternoon. We have 6 items for your consideration. The first item is an award recommendation for bid number 2021-081, domestic water pump replacement project for the Facilities Management Department, awarding to Infinity Contractors International in the amount of $109,631. If approved, we're also requesting contract approval and acceptance of the payment and performance bond.
Move for approval?
Second. We have a motion, a second, any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
The second item is also an award recommendation regarding bid number 2021-089, our annual contract for tire repairs and service, awarding to the primary, secondary, and alternate vendors listed in the court communique per unit price and discount for items not listed.
Move for approval.
Second?
We have a motion, a second, any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
The third item is an RFQ number 2021-088. This is our annual contract for environmental consulting services for transportation services and facilities management. We're requesting approval to conduct negotiations with the high-ranking vendors listed in the court communique per contract terms.
Move approval.
Second?
We have a motion, a second, any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
And the fourth item is an RFQ 2021-096. This is our annual contract for temporary healthcare personnel, requesting approval of ranking order and to conduct negotiations with the various vendors listed in the court communication.
Move for approval. Second. We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
The fifth item is a request for approval of a contract termination for bid number 2021-099. This is our annual contract for purchase of warehouse boxes and lids. This bid was awarded to BRW Western Paper Company. The request, we received a 30-day notice to cancel the award due to the shortage of corrugated material, because they're on a short allocation, and because of high prices of paper product due to lumber and availability.
So what are you going to do? Go to the next highest bidder? Or
We don't have a secondary on this contract. We only had
You're
one.
going to rebid?
Yes.
Move approval.
Second?
We have a motion, a second, any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
And the last item is an approval of an invoice payment for custom-made tablet mounts for the Sheriff's Office to Tiger Welding and Manufacturing in the amount of $7,589. This was an unauthorized purchase.
So we didn't get a purchase order.
Nope.
Why did we do it? Who did it?
It was authorized by Henry Reyes in the Sheriff's Office.
Is Henry here today? I want to thank him for his $7,500 donation.
I don't see him here.
We don't have anybody from the Sheriff's Office to talk about this. I mean, what is the response for why they did the work without having a purchase order?
They originally told me that an employee who is no longer with them started the project, and they ordered some tablet mounts. This is for the inmates to do court hearings from the jail. So the tablets would be mounted in the jail facility. And the original tablet mounts they ordered were just regular tablet mounts that you see that hold monitors, the computer monitors, and jail standards didn't approve those. So they went out and found a company just to make something that would meet jail standards, but they never involved the purchasing department. And they started that project last year in 2020. And the first that I heard of it was April or May when the vendor asked for payment and the invoice showed up. And they said they just thought that the person who's no longer with the sheriff's office had gotten approval from us, but we were never involved in that project.
Sounds like some custom made.
Yes, it's a custom made case for the inmates to not be able to tamper with the monitor. And they ordered 50 of them.
Well, we can't not pay for them. But we need our procedures to be followed.
Well,
What
and
do we do about that?
the only person standing in front of us right now is the person who should have been included in the process. So I'm going to suggest we put this on hold until somebody from the sheriff's department can come and explain how we're going to make sure this doesn't happen again. Because in all honesty, I mean, when I came on board, I think all of us were told that you buy something without a purchase order, you get to pay for it, and the county appreciates and will acknowledge your donation to the county. And you can, have you gotten to pay for something? I mean, if you have, I want to know.
I agree.
So let's put a hold on this one, and I'm sorry that the vendor's going to have to wait a little bit longer, but.
Okay, we'll bring it back in July.
Does that fee cover all 50 of them?
I'm sorry?
There's a cost of $7,000 something. Did that pay for all 50 of them?
Yes.
Okay.
That's about a little over $100. I guess it's about $150.
$151.18.
About $150 each.
Yes, the invoice is attached.
Now, I just want to make sure that, I mean, I want to make sure that somebody's got the message down there that they need a purchase order before they start doing things.
Yes, and I've had a long, lengthy conversation with them about it. I told them no the first time, and then I told them that it would be a donation from the vendor. And when I reached out to the vendor,
I bet the vendor loved that.
When I reached out to the vendor, he just circled back to Mr. Reyes, and then I had a phone call with a group of people.
Marvin, how'd you get in this? Henry, okay, that's what you say.
No,
that's what
not
say.
that one.
Maybe Marvin wanted to write a check.
Henry Reyes. So then I had another Zoom meeting with a group full of people from the sheriff's office, and I expressed to them that what we normally do is either the employee has to pay for it or the vendor has to donate it. And I went through the process and reminded them of it, and they said it wouldn't happen again.
So I just received a communications from Chief Simons, and he said that he could be here shortly. Maybe we might want to take this up after close.
Okay, well, yeah, that'll be fine. Why don't we do that? And then we've still got a couple of when are we doing the ARPA?
That's going to be after it closed.
Okay. We'll come back to that.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I don't think you need to stick around if you don't, I mean, if you've got, because we'll make the motion, but I just want somebody to tell me what's happened
Yes,
going to
I'll
prevent this
be
from
here for,
happening
I'll be
again.
here for the ARPA discussion.
Okay. Are there any appointments today? There being none, then we'll move forward with the claims, including the addendum.
Move approval.
Second?
Now, a motion and a second to approve the claims, including the addendum. Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
I do have a comment. Unfortunately, I'm going to miss this work session on ARPA because I have a commitment for a TERS board meeting in Arlington, which that was scheduled almost 3 weeks ago, before we laid out our schedule for the work session. So I hate to miss it, but I did have a pretty lengthy conversation with Kristen towards the tail end of last week, so I did already express some of my concerns. I won't go into all of them, but I will say, and somewhat to your point, Judge, about the auditor and staffing needs is, I know that we are a lean run county, which that goes a really long way. But I think with us being over a year into COVID, that as we're having this discussion about resources that we need, is we have to consider staffing. Because if you wear one hat around here, you wear 10 or 15, and burnout is real. And I just, want to make sure for everyone who's already been doing all this hard work that we are increasing our capacity as much as possible, right? We'll be smart about it. So that's kind of my overarching thing, but that's it.
Okay.
Agreed.
Russell, are you going to talk about the 87th? Do you have anything from, I guess we've gone past our signing deadline, so tell us what he did and didn't do.
Good afternoon, Judge and Commissioners. Very brief legislative update. The governor's veto period did end on June the 20th, which was on Sunday. One of the most significant vetoes, he used his line item veto power to veto all of Article 10 in the budget. In the Appropriations Act, and Article 10 is all of the legislature, is the House, the Senate, the Legislative Budget Board, and all associated legislative entities, including Ledge Council. So beginning on September 1 of this year, whenever the state's fiscal year begins, those folks do not have an appropriation to cover any of their costs, staff, or any of the rest of that. So because of that, we're expecting the first special session to begin sometime in July. So mid to late, latter half of July is probably when that's going to be. There's a within the teens deadline for the comptroller to actually get the budget certified, to put it in, to begin to make payments throughout the year. So we should be looking within the next probably 2 to 3 weeks, hearing whenever the next session will be. This first special session will be called. That will then trigger it. We'll begin having discussions, and Article 10 of the budget will be on there, as well, and perhaps a number of other issues that he has said that he wants to put on.
So if they don't reach some sort of an agreement, then basically everyone, with the exception of the reps and the senators, will cease to get paid.
Their staff members will, and as well as those other agencies, will not be paid, will not be compensated.
All the agencies, all of the
legislative agencies.
legislative agencies. The reps and the senators will continue to get their constitutional money.
It is constitutional. I'm not for sure, since that amount of money was vetoed in the Appropriations Act, whether or not it would continue, whether or not they have something to pay a constitutional issue. So, but that's a question I can come back. I can get with you to double check on that.
Yeah.
Well, the LBB has to be in existence in order to move the money around. And if you just canceled out the LBB,
you can't move around
I'll assume that nobody gets paid, including the governor.
He's
you
in
don't
a
have a
different
payroll department working.
That would be the comptroller's office, and his salary is different.
The question is the comptroller's office is working, and they pay the bills, is whether or not the governor can do something contrary to the Constitution.
I'm unadvised as to that particular issue. But we'll be coming back. We will be doing a briefing, we hope, early July, more comprehensive over various issues within the session. But wanted to make sure you all were aware of that and the pending special session that should be called for next month. So any questions?
He also doesn't like dogs. I'm sorry, I have to say that. I'm a dog lover. And he vetoed the dog bill.
Thank you all.
What was the dog bill?
There was a bill that had passed that said that you were to not leave your dog outside without water and shade, and he vetoed that.
Tether, Austin. You couldn't tether your dog with a big chain and.
Right.
And no water.
Without water
And no
or shade. Yes.
Well, he really doesn't like dogs.
It was a very controversial bill throughout the process, but, all right, thank you all.
The dog lovers are a very powerful group, but their deal got vetoed.
That's all we have at this time.
Well, then we're going to go ahead and recess our open meeting and proceed to close to discuss items exempted under section 551.071, 072, 074, 076, and 087 of the Texas Government Code.
I have no idea.
I got a quorum. Blink if you're back there recording.
We have a quorum.
We got a quorum. They blink.
Let's boogie.
Having returned from our closed session, we'll now address the following matters. The first is you're going to take care of the sheriffs. Come on up.
That's the hope.
So you brought your checkbook?
I did. It's got the sheriff's name on it now.
What we were wondering, what procedures have been put in place to prevent this from happening in the future?
Right, so we met, I think it was last week or the week before last, with Miss Melissa Lee and Christopher Lax, and we acknowledged that the sheriff's office could have done a better job, should have done a better job at communicating the purchase of the mounts with purchasing. And I think what it was just a result of too many hands in the pot with the project, and there was a changeover in some of the leadership positions. Chief Eckert now is the executive chief over the jail, so in detention, all expenditures, regardless of what they are, and if a check needs to be written, it's going to be written by him or with his eyes on it, just to make sure that all our I's are dotted and T's are crossed.
Okay. And I think maybe Chief Simon said to GK that y'all might pay for this out of your forfeiture funds?
Commissary funds.
Commissary funds?
Correct.
Super. That would be even better. I'll move that JD kind of suggested that too as we were.
I'll rest my case.
That's right. So that's a form of a motion, right?
Yes.
We might have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes 3 with 1 abstention and 1 missing.
Missing in action.
Yeah.
So
wait a minute. I guess we got 2 actual missing. We got 2 missing in action right now. So.
Thank you. Thank you. So just heard that Commissioner Allen is on her way back also.
Good.
For the work session.
So if we get this work session done quickly, she will have come back for nothing.
Yeah, let's get it done. We'll be here till midnight.
Natalie, if you're listening, would you bring that paper that I left in my office?
Okay, so let's go ahead and start. I think we made mention during the first part of our court session today that we're going to be conducting a series of work sessions over the next probably 6 to 8 weeks with the court as it relates to ARPA. We did send some material out to you on Friday. That material included a schedule as far as how we were wanting to proceed. It also had a slide presentation in there which we're going to go over today. So we're going to have a variety of different presenters today. Kristen is going to start off with a general discussion. Then we're going to ask Mr. Schaffner to come forward and talk a little bit about the PowerPoint and some of the issues in there. We are going to have discussions as far as a public policy statement that we have drafted, and at the end of, or at the conclusion of this work session, we're going to ask you to take action on that. We're going to talk about some things that we think that we can do immediately and make some recommendations to you. Also, we're going to lay out the different type of activities we're going to be covering in the various work sessions that we're going to be holding. It's going to fall within the 4 pillars that, or areas of focus. So we're not calling them pillars anymore. They're areas of focus as it relates to ARPA. So with that...
So let me ask one question. How far out, you said that Commissioner Allen was on her way back. Do we know how far out she is?
She just left.
Just left Arlington?
Yeah, right. As y'all getting out of close, she was leaving.
Okay.
So do we want to wait for her?
Well, Commissioner Fickus is also going to be out for a few minutes. I know, I'm glad you're not here. I can just say that, because otherwise I know what you'd be doing to me. Let's give it just a few minutes, and then we'll begin again. I'm sorry, JD.
That's all right. I'm going to be leaving shortly.
So we're in recess right now.
All right, who's starting this thing off? Come on, Devin.
It was said that it was going to be Russell.
So is Commissioner Allen? Okay. Just give me a second until she gets here.
None of the rest of us gets that kind of consideration, Mr. Manius. You stand in my door until I get up out of my chair.
I stand there until you invite me in.
Should we all cheer when she comes in?
Don't have the energy.
Good afternoon.
Welcome back. That was a long lunch.
I wish. I got him a snack at least.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon. As GK said, I'm going to provide a very quick overview of process map and also a diagram just to provide you with an overview of the ARPA planning process, hopefully from beginning to what will be the end and what that generally will look like. So I've put together a couple of documents. These are very much living documents. You'll see different iterations of them as they will evolve through these work sessions. The first is a planning map just so that you can see how all of the components of this planning process will fit together, as well as some key dates and session dates, as well as reporting due dates. So you should have a printout of that in your red folder. I'm happy to answer any questions about that. The second is just a slightly different version of the same information for those who like a visual. Starting on the top left, these are our inputs, beginning with U.S. Treasury guidance, moving into work sessions, which we are in our first of today. Work sessions will inform our focus areas. Russell's going to talk a little bit later about those 4 focus areas we'll be working within. And then, of course, the needs and resources assessment. That will be composed of 2 main elements, internal and external. The external component will involve various members, stakeholders of the community, and will involve focus groups, stakeholder interviews, as well as surveys. That will be performed by our consultant, who has yet to be identified, and they will be reaching out to various types of community partners, nonprofits, foundations, chambers, businesses, other community organizations, cities, electeds, etc. So as you can see, it's a very comprehensive list of inputs to this planning process for ARPA, which will result in hopefully some awards, allocations, and then obviously there is reporting to Treasury and then ongoing auditing internally at least, and eventually perhaps externally. So that is to provide you just an overview from beginning to end. I won't go into any more detail than that, as I know we have a lot of information to share this afternoon. I'm happy to answer any questions about the process.
At any point in here, are we, in the needs assessment, are they going to be looking at some sort of a recap of all of the dollars that are coming to the county?
Yes, sir.
Talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So that'll be part of the resources, part of the needs and resources assessment. So it really is 2 simultaneous pieces. So aside from going into the community and finding out where the needs are, you've also got a list of all of the funding streams coming down through ARPA, one of which is the fiscal recovery funds that Tarrant County has been awarded. If you think of it kind of as a matrix, you've got your needs here and then your resources. And what you would hope is that there's a resource to meet every identified need. Where there aren't, those are the gaps, and that will be presented in the final report by the consultant.
So again, but what they're gonna be trying to identify is not only the 408 of FRF money that we're getting, but all of the other pots of money that's coming into the county, maybe under the county's umbrella. Some of it not, schools, cities, everything that's coming in, and at least some sort of an indication or an understanding of how that money may be being used if we're asked or if we're asking
Yes, sir.
others to participate.
Yes, sir.
And that will occur, will that be something that they'll be talking with folks about as they're doing the needs?
Yes,
and the
sir.
external, will that be a part of the external questionnaires and stuff that are going on?
Yes, it is. It'll also be highly informed by guidance and what we know is coming down from Treasury, all the different streams of funding and through the various federal agencies. But as far as how those agencies will be spending their allocations, if they are receiving direct allocations, that would be part of the assessment. Yes, sir.
And will they also identify any other needs surveys that might be going on at the same time?
I'm sorry, for some reason, didn't hear that what you asked.
Will they also be identifying any other needs surveys and collaborating or
Yes.
working with them on
Yes,
that?
absolutely. And as a matter of fact, that's part of the scope of services. There's reference to utilizing existing surveys and ongoing surveys so that they can collaborate with other agencies.
When do you anticipate that when are the RFPs supposed to be back in?
July 1st. And based on the timeline provided by purchasing, which is obviously a tentative timeline, we plan to propose a contractor or bring a contract the first court in August. I believe it's the 3rd. That's the plan right now.
And who will be evaluating the RFPs?
We have representatives from purchasing, audit, budget and risk management, and the administrator's office. and community development.
Okay. Public health?
Not on this one. They have quite a few other grant opportunities that are specific to public health and are working through those right now.
I had asked the same question.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I understand your line of thought, that's more than mine, I think so.
That doesn't mean that there won't be any collaboration with public health throughout this process. I'm sure that there will be. And as a matter of fact, you'll hear from them in some of these work sessions.
Okay. Is there any opportunity for outside groups to give any input on what should be included in the needs survey?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Those will be work products that will be developed once a consultant comes on, and there will be ample opportunity for collaboration.
Before the consultant is chosen.
Okay. You said, I'm sorry. You asked about a survey, so maybe I'm misunderstanding.
Is there any opportunity for other agencies to give any input upon possible things to look at in the form of the consultants?
Sure. As long as it doesn't interfere with the purchasing process.
And who do they convey those to?
Are you talking about to make sure that we choose a consultant that has skill sets to do the surveys? Or are you asking what they should be looking for once they begin the surveys?
Probably both. Probably both. Because, I mean, I'm hoping that one of the things that, depending upon what RFPs we get, I mean, and maybe it's just a matter of saying to some of these other agencies, this RFP is out, we want to make sure you understand it's out. If you know of any groups or consulting groups that you feel like would be good at this, make sure they get our survey.
Yes, sir.
Or RFP, and at least consider possibly applying.
Yes, sir, and we actually have done that.
Okay.
So I have sent that link out to quite a few community agencies and asked them to forward it to any potential interested vendors.
Okay. United Way being one of those.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I guess the only other one would be the foundations.
Yes, sir.
Community, Rose Bradshaw.
Yes, sir. That's been done.
Good. Okay.
Any other questions about the planning process? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for the map and the diagram. It's helpful.
Good afternoon again, Judge and Commissioners. We're going to walk through a number of slides for you. We're going to begin outlining, this is a slide that you saw last week. You're going to see this slide a lot. This is about ARPA funding streams. On the one side, you have the FRF funds, those state and local fiscal recovery funds that the state received, the county received, and our cities received. Then on the other side are the other federal initiatives, and this is again just to make sure, and as we walk through this discussion, and lay out to you a suggested policy statement and 4 suggested focus areas, that those items are to be how we are going to recommend to the court that you all look at usage and processes regarding the fiscal recovery funds. The other federal initiatives that are in ARPA, those will have other strings, other processes, other programs associated with it that will be more specific and won't necessarily be county commissioners court determined. So I want to make sure as we begin this discussion, we kind of branch the two over and show specifically that what we're going to be discussing is how y'all use the fiscal recovery funds, but also creating a policy statement as well as these focus areas that use to utilize those other pots of funds in the most practical manner. So that's what we're going to try to do over the next little bit. All right,
That's the most helpful chart I've seen in a long time.
And thank you, Commissioner. And we're going to be working on adding to that because there's transit components and some other issues that need to be added to that chart over the next few weeks. So this is the staff suggested a fiscal recovery fund policy statement. For Commissioners Court, and I'll go ahead and read it as you all read it. It is the policy of the Tarrant County Commissioners Court to promote the highest and best use of funds received through the American Rescue Plan Act by leveraging existing resources and prioritizing programs without an alternative source of funding. The Commissioners Court will direct the use of these funds in 4 focus areas: prepare for the future, improve public health and wellness, revitalize the economy, and strengthen the community. So again, that is a staff-suggested policy statement. We can work through any thoughts, changes, or edits now, where we are going to be asking, Mr. Manius will ask you to actually adopt this statement or a statement with your edits here in a little bit. So if you want to dwell on it as we walk through the program, the discussion, we can, but we can always come back to it at your convenience. Moving on to the focus areas. Again, we're asking the Commissioners Court to consider 4 focus areas on how to use your fiscal recovery funds. Prepare for the future, that's looking at internal county-related issues. Improve public health and wellness, how we deal with public health issues, public health disparities, complications in COVID-19 within the community. Revitalizing the economy and strengthening the community. Each 4 of these came from the interim final rule as various headings from there. Commissioner Brooks?
These public health concerns and disparities, do they all have to be COVID related?
No, sir.
Good, thank you.
The interim final rule has given us excellent guidance on kind of the metes and bounds regarding that issue, and it does not have to do, it can be historic disparities.
Good. So it can help us improve public health and wellness overall in our community.
Yes, sir.
By addressing disparities, social determinants, the whole 9 yards of lack of opportunity that leads to lack of health.
Yes, sir. There are programs that will fit within what you're suggesting fits within what the metes and bounds of what the interim final rule suggests.
Thank you.
Prepare for the future. Again, this is looking internally. What does Tarrant County as an organization, what do we need to look at as we move forward? What are our capital investment opportunities that we have? Facilities improvement and workplace improvements. Facilities, or do we need new capital facilities? Workplace, what do we need to, what renovations or changes need to be made to facilitate the mitigation and prevention of COVID-19? Workforce development, that's looking, we are living in a time of a significant changing economy. What does that need to look like for our workforce? And then the revenue loss calculation and determination, we're hoping to be able to come back to you all in a few weeks and have a much lengthier, broader discussion. Audit, our audit department is working diligently to get that resolved, but it's going to take some more time. So, Commissioner Allen, did you have a question or statement?
No.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
And to clarify something that was discussed earlier regarding the quarantine leave. So as we're working through the various funding buckets, the CARES Act funding, CRF funding, the monies we got from the Consolidated Appropriations Act, as well as the new FRF funds, all of them have different regulations, and so it takes staff sometimes a little bit to work through the various issues. Quarantine leave, the court can use fiscal recovery funds. We're confident, pretty confident. You can use those for quarantine leave that was given to mitigate COVID-19, for the prevention and mitigation of COVID-19, from March the 3rd, 2021 of this year until the expiration of these funds. Anything before March the 3rd, you cannot use that. That is not an FRF eligible expenditure. And so the fund, the expenses incurred before March the 3rd, we have not, staff has yet to identify an outside funding source to be able to cover those expenditures. But that does not mean that they have not been identified, and Helen could talk on exactly where we got the money from to cover those costs, but those have been covered. But the court can do a program for quarantine leave specifically to COVID-19 from March the 3rd forward. So I wanted to make that clarification. And as things do fluctuate, there will be lots of clarifications as we go forward. Improve public health and wellness. This is the general COVID-19 mitigation, where anything related to COVID-19 is going to fall under. Preparing for the next pandemic. Behavioral health care. The interim final rule goes to great lengths to discuss the impacts of COVID-19 on behavioral health care and the greater need for it within the community and our ability to respond to that need. So behavioral health care, substance abuse, mental health, those types of items, the Commissioners Court will have broad latitude to meet those needs within the community, to use the FRF funds to meet those needs within the community. And then disparities in public health outcomes. Commissioner, to your earlier point, that's how they like to address it within that interim final rules, disparities in public health outcomes. Revitalizing the economy. Economic assistance programs, again, as we discussed last week, this is very, very broad to businesses, individuals, affected industries, very broad. And Commissioners Court has quite a bit of latitude on how you all would like to help folks. The challenge is going to be coordinating those with those other programs, especially those under SBA, Small Business Association, that have put out, tens of billions of dollars since the CARES Act to, if not hundreds of billions of dollars, to affected businesses and other issues on how we work through that. Businesses and nonprofits, looking at individuals, and this is where we'd like to work through the infrastructure issue on how the Commissioners Court wants to handle the ability for that the statute gives us to fund sewer, water, and broadband infrastructure out of FRF funds. And Commissioner Allen, we are continuing to work on the kind of overview of broadband. There's some moving pieces we're waiting on, but we'll get you something.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
And then finally, the coordination with the 2021 bond program that you all are developing. So hypothetically, if a project has a sewer or water component, road's going to be built, but the city needs to also replace sewer and water that's underneath that, or there's a stormwater issue associated with it, or a flood control component associated with the transportation project. We probably should evaluate how to coordinate that with the use of FRF funds to where your transportation dollars could go farther, but you carve out those types of projects to allow that. And there's some significant coordination that's going to have to be done through that and evaluated, but wanted to make sure that you all knew that from staff's perspective it's on our radar, and we're going to work through how to coordinate those issues.
That's very creative thinking.
So on the next one, strengthening the community. State and local partner coordination. The state's got $16 billion. Other Tarrant County cities, $450 million plus dollars. It's a tremendous amount of money. The ESSER dollars are somewhere over $500 million in our community, in the Tarrant County community, and that's only from ESSER 2, ESSER 3, not ESSER 2, which has yet to come out. Statewide, that's $6.1 billion. You're looking at a tremendous amount of money in our community. You look at the child care money that'll be coming down and those other options. How do we coordinate those issues and coordinate the uses of funds? And Judge, to your point, there's been discussion of pooling or whatnot. This is an opportunity through this coordination for the county, those cities, and other entities to find common and shared goals and figure out how we structure investments in those goals and how do we find the highest and best use of funds to achieve those goals that are laid out.
You say one point, you said $16 billion coming to the state.
Yes, sir.
Does that include some of the education money, or is that just state money?
That is state-only FRF.
It's just been sent to the state and say, here, do something with it.
That they had this under the same interim final rule guidance that the Commissioners Court is under.
We know that the feds have sent to the state all of the money for the cities under the 50,000 population size.
I have not been able to confirm that the state has received those funds.
Well, you haven't been able to confirm that the state has applied for the funds.
Correct. So therefore I can't. But
Well, I was just getting ready to ask, since this is a continuation of the conversation
Yes.
from your call last week, right?
That's right. I mean,
And Judge, I've been reaching out to the folks that should know. I have not gotten
At the
definitive
state or at the
confirmation
feds?
at the state.
when we
Several.
reach to the feds, because I'll bet you they know whether they sent the check.
Okay, we can do that.
Why don't you tell us what ESSER is?
So ESSER is the elementary and secondary education, elementary and secondary schools emergency recovery funds. Those are like you all have the FRF funds, those are for school districts.
But are those going to the state first and then have to be passed through?
Yes, sir. ESSER 1 was put into the foundation school program, didn't make it down to the locals directly. ESSER 2, they're still waiting on that allocation because of some issues. And then ESSER 3 did come down, and that was a large amount of money. I believe Fort Worth ISD, I believe, got over $200 million. Huge amounts of money to our school districts.
I was on a chamber call last week with Arlington School District. They definitely got theirs.
Somebody said Fort Worth is now up over 300 million.
It's a tremendous amount of money, but again, ESSER 3 has come down.
ESSER 1 was the foundation, so basically the state put that into the state, the money that was going to come from the state down to the districts to
Yes.
take care of M&O. They cleaned their money.
So they applied that to the foundation school program, and we saw the net effect of that in the supplemental appropriation bill, which had $5.9 billion in additional unexpected revenue.
And so then in the ESSER 2, we still don't know what's going to happen with that.
Correct.
Okay.
And
Is that
ESSER
supposed to
3
be
has come
covered
down.
in what the governor promised that he was going to describe to the legislature when he
My
called them back in
understanding,
the special session?
no, sir. My understanding with ESSER 2 is whether or not the state can meet a certification requirement. That was in the Consolidated Appropriation Act, but was not in ARPA. So regarding the strengthened communities, we'll work on coordination. Again, that's a lot of high-level discussion, goal setting, what do we want the community to look like, and then how do we figure out how to fund how we get there. Homeless prevention, homelessness prevention, that again is mentioned significantly, housing, and also strengthening our nonprofit community. There's a lot of opportunity for the nonprofit community in the interim final rule and the use of FRF funds. Those are issues that we can really work with. Commissioners Court is able to work with staff and those within the community to make a difference.
Could we, in helping our nonprofits, could we incentivize and say, okay, we'll give you X amount of money as a match for what you raise?
I have not looked at that specific issue directly. I think that could be a pretty heavy lift to get to because we need to tie it. Any FRF funding that you all do, that you all decide to do, we need to tie it back to one of those 4 items that was passed in statute. And the vast majority of them are going to be going to, dealing with mitigating the COVID-19 impact on public health and economic impacts.
From a housing standpoint, if we said to the extent to a city like Fort Worth, if you're willing to put X amount into housing or homelessness, we could match that money.
I believe if you look at it to where you have a common goal and Commissioners Court is willing to reducing homelessness in the community or reducing the impact to individuals experiencing homelessness, that is something that is specifically called out in the interim final rule, and you all meeting that challenge and need, however you want to put it together, as long as you all are giving a grant or partnering with somebody to make the matching aspect, I don't think that's something that would be helpful necessarily to the discussion as far as it is to goal setting of, hey, we the Commissioners Court, we want to work on achieving this goal of reducing homelessness in our community or mitigating those needs. Would you all partner with us to get there? But as far as I think we would be challenged to do dollar for dollar. We'll put up our FRF dollars if you raise a certain amount. I think that would be very complicated.
Nonprofit, it's going to have to be.
Yeah. I mean, I think you all need to look at that, and if you want to partner with a school district or with a city or the state, I think we can get there. But I think not dollar for dollar fundraising matches. I think that could be very complicated.
Okay.
So the various tasks and everything, such as homelessness prevention and housing, Russell, when you talk about those, are you talking about these things solely being funded out of FRF? Or are you talking about other programs and revenue streams?
I'm very glad you brought that up. As we discussed last week, a number of these programs have already received funding through both Consolidated Appropriation Act and ARPA. We received the Emergency Rental Assistance Program money, 2 rounds of that, ERAP 1 from the CAA and then ERAP 2 from ARPA. Again, that helps with rental assistance, utility bills. Again, those are for renters. We did receive, and we know what our allocation, but we don't think we have received the home funding, which was about $5 million, a little over $5 million that can help with homelessness. As far as the FRF funds go, for what you all have direct control of, individuals experiencing homelessness and mitigating those particular issues, that is something explicitly allowed, but you do need to have coordination with those other programs and other federal initiatives to find those highest and best use of funds.
And that's going to be important when we get to later on in this presentation about not just simply utilizing our FRF monies, but being able to identify other revenue sources that we can pass on to nonprofits and our partners in the community.
So that concludes my particular segment of this presentation. Mr. Manius is going to walk you all through the immediate action items for the court, where you'll also have a couple other presenters. But are there any questions for me or for this segment of the presentation today? All right. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Russell.
So I know we're moving fairly quickly through some of these, but you all did have an opportunity to see the proposed policy statement. This was something that we actually sent out to you on Friday. And I guess our first question, are you all satisfied with that statement? I think it's general enough to cover what you want to do. Yes, it's flexible enough that you can move in several different directions.
I don't have a problem with it.
I'm fine with it.
It's okay?
Good. Commissioner Johnson, are you okay with that?
I'm good.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so there are some items that we want you to consider that we can move on fairly quickly. And these are ideas that our staff, working with some of the other departments, have come up with, and we want to talk to you a little bit about that first. The first one is, and it's entitled Public Health Modernization. So think about it this way. Our public health department is a good public health department. It's a good public health department in basically normal times, which we try to have most of the time. We found going through the pandemic that it put a lot of stress on public health. And in fact, it showed some of the weaker areas that we have in our public health system. And I'm talking solely of Tarrant County Public Health Department, okay? So what we would like to propose is that we engage a consultant to do a total evaluation of public health. And what we would like to accomplish is, first of all, determine if our structure of public health is what it needs to be. Our facilities, and we know we're going to need additional facilities, and I think Marvin is going to be talking a little bit about that. But what kind of facilities do we need so that we can possibly use some of the ARPA funds to pay for that? One of the things that I personally think that we need to look at our data systems. It was very stressed. We did as good a job as we could. But if we have an opportunity with the amount of money that we currently have, then let's take a good deep dive into our data systems and our communication systems so that we can have state-of-the-art data, that for those who like to slice and dice data, and also to be clear and succinct as to how we report information to you, but then also the communication piece, because it's not just our conversations that we have with you, but how we carry that message to all the corners of the county and all the segments of the county. And so we would like to propose that we engage I'm going to keep using the term state-of-the-art, but a state-of-the-art consultant, that we would be able to look at our entire public health. This may be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to really improve how we do our business in public health. So that's going to be an ask that we would like to make. The first piece of that is to simply do a scope of services for a consultant. You all would take a look at that. You would obviously have input into it. You would make a determination, yes, we need to go do this piece. We may need to strengthen this area. We may need to step back in another area. But we will never get there until we start. And that's what we're asking for you all to consider and give us direction. There is absolutely nothing that we lose by begin to creating an RFP document for the court to look and evaluate. So that's going to be one of our asks. That's going to be our first ask that we see out of the ARPA funds and the FRF funds.
We discussed this a few weeks ago, and I think we were all pretty well in agreement that a comprehensive study of our public health department was something that we need to do.
If I can just get a nod of heads, then.
Well, and I will nod the head as long as part of that is going back and reviewing what has occurred over the last 15 months. Because I think a major part of that, I don't want to build a public health department that's able to is prepared for a 100-year pandemic.
We're not asking for. We're not asking.
I understand that, but I'm just saying I want something.
Your Honor, we're going to have to do exactly what you're asking, and go back and do a critical analysis as to, the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats that we had over the last 18 months.
Well, and I agree, but I want to be sure that we're not talking that your WEIR is everybody in the county. It's Fort Worth, it's Arlington, it's the cities it's the nonprofits. I want all those folks to be the part of the what we're going to have to do, because.
You'll get that. You'll have those conversations in greater depth whenever we begin to flesh out this statement of work. Because we're not going to go out on the street on anything until we hand you all that, and you all get to say, okay, you need to strengthen this piece, or you might have missed it here, or yeah, that's the way we need to go.
Go for it.
So we got to get started.
Okay,
Right.
very good. So we're also going to be talking about facilities. Mr. Reyes is going to do that. One of the things that that was brought up this morning, as far as it was directed at the auditor's office, so we're going to give her an opportunity to talk about it after a while, is labor and workforce for the county and the need to expand our resources in order to do some of this work. So with that being said, Mr. Reyes, you want to come up and talk about the facility improvements and the space plan development?
All right, good afternoon.
Hello.
All right. Sorry, I haven't used this one before, so. All right, so today I'm going to be speaking on the long-range space plan that we're proposing. So I want to preface this with everything's changed, right? This whole world has changed. The way I shop, the way you shop, the way you work, the facilities that where you work at has changed in the way that we do things. And so this long-range space plan comes from that. It's not just a long-range space plan, it's a long-range space plan that applies the lessons learned in a COVID-19 environment, these things that we learned. So we propose a space plan study that's going to assess the current county-wide space standards, the uses, and propose possible long-range modifications. The current usage is going to be compared to the best practices that we learned from the COVID-19 pandemic. We will eventually conceptualize a long-range space plan considering social distancing and COVID-19 mitigation protocols. What we suggest is a project steering committee. Judge, I think this is kind of to your point in the sense that we will get the get the experience, the input from the departments, from the elected officials, because what we have right now here in Tarrant County is experience and lots of it. We have a lot of lessons learned as well. So I think this is a great time to be able to marry the top-down approach of what is it, what do we need, when do we need it, but also the bottom-up approach of what do we have and what have we learned from it. And so there's going to be 7 steps. These are just generalized steps, again, of the way that we're going to look at this long-range plan. The first one is to develop understanding of operations. What I talked about, the input from the department heads. How does your actual department work? How does your precinct work? And then the second step would be analyzing, assessing the buildings. And that's, I remember a few weeks ago I spoke about this, is analyzing these buildings. Basically, we can't create a long-range space plan and talk about a shack that could be demoed in the next 5 years. We need to make sure that this building makes sense for the long range. So that's what this building assessment is for. Third is forecasting the spatial needs for each department, considering the COVID-19 best practices. Then fourth is looking at those forecasts and developing them into 5-year increments. Basically, having a look back every 5 years, being able to look at this and say, okay, are we following this? Does this still make sense? And so this plan allows for that. Fifth, we're going to develop strategic options to address future space needs, and we'll conduct a cost analysis as well. Basically, there's going to be 3 options given to you, at least 3 options given to you, so you could see the different ways that we could go in the long-range space plan. And you'll get a cost analysis on that as well. Then 6, we can prepare a draft and final staffing and space needs assessment. And then finally, project implementation and capital asset planning. We have a plan, and so the last step is to be able to give you a plan on how we plan on using that actual long-range space plan. So, step 1, like I talked about, the project steering committee is going to be put together. We're going to interview relevant department office heads and staff to gain understanding of the operations and lessons learned during COVID-19. Again, input from all of you. We're also going to review the current policies and procedures related to telecommuting and attendance. That's important. Again, a lot has changed, so we need to be able to figure out and get those lessons learned from each and every one of you. Step 2 is the building assessment and file management. So there's 3 phases here. Generalized phases. The first one is to be able to take inventory for our buildings. We need to be able to know what it is that we have. We have 60-plus buildings. In what condition are they in? We need to be able to figure that out. So the phase 1 is to establish the inventory, identify the buildings, and develop a schedule. We'll conduct workshops with the consultant that we end up going with. And phase 2 is to do the actual field inspections. These are subject matter experts going out into the field, looking at generators, looking at roofs, looking at the envelope of the building, and being able to assess these buildings and give the condition that they are in. Phase 3 is to be able to analyze that data, establish trends, extrapolate that data to make it make sense to us. So that's step 2. Now, what is it that we're going to be looking at? So in construction management, we use something called Uniformat 2. It's an AIA standard. This is how we develop a schedule of values. This is how we extrapolate. Basically, if we look at a building, this is how we pull apart all those elements of a building. So this is called Uniformat 2. And so in the building assessment, why reinvent the wheel? We're going to do the same thing. We're going to look at those elements just like we look at them through construction management and be able to give an assessment of the building envelope, which would be your foundations, your basement construction, your superstructure, and your exterior enclosure, and the roofing. These are the color codes. So being in the military, I really liked colors. They made more sense to me. So this is what we're really looking at here. So for instance, you can see Building 80. This is again pieced out in Uniformat 2. So you can see that B20, which was the exterior enclosure, that was graded in 87, and so on and so forth. We were able to get all these scores for Building 80 and we were able to get an average for that building. So for instance, that building may have been a score of, let's just say, 70. So it fell into the yellow category. So how does this help you? You're going to be able to see what condition each building is in. You can either look at the score or you can look at the color, whichever one it is that you would like. But you can be able to see whether it's feasible to plan for this building in the long run or not. And you'll also be able to get a cost analysis of how much it'll take to get this building up to either the yellow or the green status if it is in the red status. And please stop me if I'm going too fast. So step 3, we're going to forecast staffing and spatial needs for each department. We're going to analyze historic and current COVID-19 workload trends, project levels, and develop a baseline performance benchmark. We'll also assess, like I said, the current space standards. We have space standards here at Tarrant County. We're going to assess those. Again, COVID-19, it's changed a lot of things, so we're going to assess that. We're going to review mobility, census, and growth data. And we're going to look at this in the 10-year horizon and also a 20-year outlook. So in a nutshell, basically what I'm saying is we're going to look at 10 years and then 20 years. The long-range space plan is going to look at this for the next 20 years. This is an example of it's not our space standard, but it's an example of a space standard of what it could look like if we do decide to reassess the space standards. Then census, mobility, and growth data, just to further elaborate on it. Again, like I said, we're going to look at the 10-year horizon and then the 20-year outlook. We're going to be able to incorporate future workloads, estimates, and service level approaches that have changed and are anticipated due to COVID-19. We're going to look at mobility ratios as well, right? We have people that are telecommuting, rather. We have part-timers. We talked about possibly upping the staff as well. So we're going to be able to look at that. We're also going to be able to look at visitors average per day. Has that changed? Is it more? Is it less? And then, like I said, the in-person versus telecommuting is something that we have to look at as well. So step 4, again, we're going to take all that data and be able to forecast it. We can look at it annually. You can always look at long-range plans annually, but no less than or rather no more than 5-year increments is really what you want to look at the long range. Make sure that we're on track for what we planned. And if we need to change, then we need to change that. But we need to be able to look at these in that 5-year increments.
Marvin,
yes, sir.
It's late in the day, so forgive me for asking what may be an obvious question. But I gather that at some point during your presentation, you switched from just talking about public health facilities to talking about every facility that Tarrant County has. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, that was from the second word. No, I'm just saying, I think yeah.
Tread softly.
So continuing on step 4, we're going to consider social distancing best practices and what we learned from COVID-19. Again, 5-year increments. Then in step 5, this is the fun part. We get to develop 3 strategic options for you as a project steering committee to address future space needs. Now, these options aren't necessarily all the old buildings, not necessarily leased buildings, not it's not new construction either. It's a mix. It's going to be a mix. And so we're going to be able to give you 3 options with cost estimates and give you a recommendation based off of that data as well. This will all come from the steering committee, but again, there's going to be 3 options and with a recommendation for one of them. The 6th step is a detailed description of each department and the current workload, staff projections, and facility space allocations that address future space and staffing needs that incorporate, again, COVID-19 best practices. Step 7, very important, right? We got a plan. The best plans don't work unless we actually act upon them, and there's a really good plan to be able to go follow through with that plan. So step 7, what it is, it's a roadmap for design, construction, and commissioning of each project. This is what you're going to get to show you how we can get from project 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. This also includes the ability to align yourself with future bonds, with future capital expenditures, future budget needs. We'll be able to better prepare ourselves with this long-range plan as well. The project timeline, right now, if we started right now, it would take 6 months. That's what we've gathered from this. Right now, consultants are in high demand. Everybody's asking the same question: what do we have? What do we need? What have we learned from it? And delayed action could add months to completion timeframe simply because of the consultants being asked these same questions from all different entities. Again, in a nutshell, what we have right now is we learned a lot from lessons from the COVID-19 lessons learned. But what we have here again in Tarrant County is the experience, right? So I want to be able to make sure that we gather all the experience from you all, the court, from the department heads, so that we could be able to not only take the lessons learned from COVID-19, but also just your experience to be able to guide us for the next 10 to 20 years. This is a great legacy that we could leave behind for 10 to 20 years down the road. Now we're open for questions now.
I have one question for you. Back in your step 4 where you talked about the 5-year increments, why at 5 years? Is that a industry standard or?
Like I said,
practice?
it is an industry standard, but it's no more than 5 years. You don't want to go year 6 and 7, and if you don't, it's kind of steering that car the right way. And so yes, that is an industry standard, but it's also what I propose as well.
Yeah. Well, and I really appreciate throughout your presentation emphasizing on the future needs and future space. I mean, I know we can't predict the future, but even in going on the tours to try to evaluate, options for the Mansfield Courthouse, what I heard from everybody was allow the flexibility for future planning and how impactful that has been on the environment for our employees, but then also the experience for our residents and customers. So, yeah.
What's this going to cost us?
So we can get that analysis or that cost estimate for you. I can get that to you. But again, this would go out for bid, and I'm thinking somewhere in the ballpark of around about $2 million.
Okay.
So as we go through this process, begin the RFP process, one of the things we've asked Marvin to do is to look at our existing buildings, and there's some things we can do right now. And one of the things we did originally with some of our buildings with the CARES Act was we installed ultraviolet lighting in the air shafts because it kills the virus. And so we're trying to see if we can do that with almost all of our buildings, because it doesn't kill just the coronavirus, but it kills other viruses. And so we're trying to see how much something like that would cost also. There's short-term fixes, there's activities, and there's midterm, and then there's long-term. Marvin was talking about the midterm and long-term here mainly, but we're trying to see if there's some other things that we can do. Maybe acquiring generators, Judge Willett, to make sure we've beefed up some of our buildings, or at least have that capacity to do that, either the buildings themselves or through emergency management.
Those ultraviolet rays work against the 5G stuff that's affecting our brains.
Judge, put your little aluminum foil hat back on and you'll be okay.
It is getting late. Thank you. So the next presenter is Ms. Tidwell. She's going to be talking about staffing needs, and
I promise to be brief. So, and it's not just my staffing needs. There's a couple of things I wanted to share with the court that I'd like for you to make certain that you think about. And I'm going to give you just a New York Times analysis that came from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that shows that state and local government, excluding education, is the second highest in predictions for shortage of applicants, qualified applicants for their jobs compared to a year ago. And while we have applicants even for our current jobs, sometimes the quality of the applicants and the type of persons that we would be interested in has not been present. There's an article in the newspaper this afternoon about 911 is experiencing trouble answering their calls because of shortage of staffing, and they can't hire and train people quick enough. To put this in perspective, though, for the county, so last year we had a $700 million budget, and we got a couple $100 million, and we had to spend it really fast. There was a pandemic, and we had a short period of time. That was a sprint. And everybody just sucked it up and headed out. And all in all, I'd say we were all probably pretty satisfied with where we wound up. Now, today, we have $120 million in grants that are not our standard county grants, and they're not the federal relief funds. We have $200 million in federal relief funds. We still have our county budget. We have $50 million in dollars of grants we've applied for, haven't been awarded. And this time next year, we'll have another $200 million. That adds up to $600 million plus our budget. We're over billions. We're over $1 billion here. And this is a marathon because this money has to be obligated, as you know, by the end of 24 and has to be spent by 26. There is no way that my office, or in my opinion, others can absorb these kinds of dollars, even in a collaborative effort, without us truly making some assessments of the types of resources that we need and the quality of those resources. And so y'all were gracious enough already to give my office a grant manager because my regular grant folks needed to stay focused on the county's grants that we've had for years. And so I have a grant manager, and I'll need some grant staff eventually, that is focused strictly on meeting the requirements of the reporting that's of the ARPA funds or the federal relief funds. So with that said, it's a lot of money, and we have to be very methodical about how we spend it. We have to be cautious about how we document why we chose to spend it that way, why we made those decisions. Quite honestly, by the time any federal auditors were to come around looking for any clawback opportunities, the majority of the people in this room today probably won't be here. I don't plan on being here. I know many of you don't plan on being here. Commissioner Allen, you may be, you may still be here, but a lot of the rest of us don't plan on being here.
I hope you have a big checkbook.
So I just want you to think about that as we come to you, as we've talked to you before about coming to you and asking for resources. And I'm going to use Vinny in public health, and I don't know if Vinny knows this. We've certainly talked to Kathy, his business manager, and this is no reflection on Vinny or Kathy or any of the people at public health. But there is absolutely no way that programmatic people can deliver programmatic services and effectively make all the financial decisions. And my staff and the grants staff and the budget staff and all of the other staff also can't make those decisions. We need those interfaces. We need program managers at public health that can interface with the programmatic side of the business and can interface with the business side and the federal restrictions of all this money. And to me, that's the only way we're going to go forward as a team. We're going to have to go forward together, but we're going to need some people to help us. I equated some of this that my son, who's 27, if I gave him $100,000, but in order to spend it, he had to come through my office. He had to call me as his mom every time to get any of it and spend it. That can't be the model that we have set up for this $600 million. Everything can't flow through the auditor's office. It can't just flow through the budget office. It's got to be the administrator's office. It's got to be public health. It's got to be the commissioner's court. It's got to be all of us working together. And so, in my estimation, in my opinion, we're going to need resources. And those may be many resources. And again, ultimately, we may find that we can't hire regular full-time county employees at current wages and current environment. But that's not my point today. My point today is we're going to need resources to help us spend this money, account for this money, and manage this money.
And get the money out to the community.
Yes. Because the last thing any of us want is to ever read about any of the things that have been said about the small business programs and the PPP program. We don't want any of that money being wasted. We don't want anyone stealing it. We don't want anyone misspending it. We don't want any of that. We want to be diligent. There's so many parameters in the reporting where we have to put forth our plans for the money and whether or not we met our plans for the money. The reporting is much more complicated than ever before, because they're actually asking us to have those metrics and those performance measures. And those will have to come from the programmatic side, flowing through the budget's office, the administrator's office, and obviously back through into the reports that we submit through the auditor's office. There's no consequences. You don't have to meet a particular standard, at least that we can see to date, but you are going to have to report on those metrics. And all of that will be public. Budget is working on developing a portal, some sort of a dashboard where we could access information, so it could be readily available. IT will need resources. Purchasing will need resources. HR will need resources. I mean, the list of needs will be long because we have so much money, which is a great opportunity, but with that comes a huge responsibility and cost as well.
And you do it right the first time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're right.
Just a comment, it's not just getting new people on board, but we're already starting to lose some of our top performers that have been with us for less than 2 years. Some that have been less than 9 months with us, simply because they're moving on to bigger and better things, and these were top performers in our office. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and ask Mr. Schaffner to come back again and talk about a program that we really want you on. We're pretty excited about what Mr. Schaffner's going to be talking about. So, Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Manius. Another immediate action item that we're looking for direction from court on is we would like to create an online recovery resource and assistance center, the RRAC. So this will be a online. We're working on the acronym.
We're just acronym soup around here.
I know. We will get you a spreadsheet with all the acronyms. It will be voluminous. But the goal is to create a centralized location to where it can be one-stop, online resource to where we can help the people in our community who need help accessing business assistance. And so it'll have links to the SBA with discussions of the various SBA programs that they can access or anything else, but comprehensive information in this resource to where there's one point of access for folks in our community to go to this website, find those resources, and then direct them out to those areas. And we can also put the work that you all are doing through these ARPA work sessions, and as we progress going forward, again, what we're doing as a county, this will be the one-stop shop for it, as well as all those one-place resource area for that initial interface for folks from our county. So that's something we're looking to put together and start compiling. It's going to be a big lift, but I think it's something that we'll be able to put through hopefully pretty quickly, next couple months. So, any questions? Thank you.
Sounds good to me.
So we really see that as a center that would not just help individuals, but businesses, nonprofits, to have discussions with them, try to direct them to areas where that there is funding, because as we've all said, that the ARPA funds, there are so many different revenue streams. And so if we can guide them so they can have access to those and work with them so that they can get the resources that they need.
Yeah. Well, and I would add that I think that's super important for people in our community who were hesitant to apply for past programs or current ones because they're so afraid of getting things wrong. And they're well-meaning, right? They're not trying to do anything, illegal, but they really need to understand what's available and to be walked through it. And obviously, I know we've had these conversations before, even when we were talking about our programs with the CRF dollars, but that need is still out there. And if we're talking about some of the most vulnerable, small businesses and other, nonprofit organizations and all of that, they still need a tremendous amount of help to access these relief dollars.
And that's what this type of center is exactly designed to do.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we're now at a point we're just simply going to wrap up and talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing on July 6th. That's our next court meeting and also our next work session. We're going to be dealing with the first areas of focus, which is prepare for the future. We intend to talk about the capital investment opportunities that the county may be able to come into, that may come into play with the county. We're going to dive deeper into the workforce aspects. We're going to talk about premium pay related issues. We're also going to get a report from the auditor's office as it relates to revenue losses and any other activities that fall within that one category. If you have any ideas, would like for us to expand on other areas, if you'll just simply let us know. I would like to say one thing in closing, though. You've heard this presentation, you've seen this presentation today. There was a lot of hard work and thought that went into this thing. And I want to personally thank my staff, because they're the ones that all came together. This is not the work product of any one individual. It's a staff effort. Thank you to the auditor's office for working with us side by side, the budget office working side by side, HR side by side. This is the group of individuals who make up the teams that do this. IT, public health is a big player in this. And the work product that they brought forward today, I think it's really pretty good. And I appreciate you all's support on it. And of course, any product can be improved upon. And so if you have comments or anything, just let us know and we'll try to incorporate it. But I do believe, as Renee said, this is a substantial amount of money, and it's a massive undertaking. But I honestly believe that the way we have this structured is the right way to go. So with that, we'll be more than happy to try to answer any questions that the court may have at this time.
They made you look real good today.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I mean, it is very, very good. Very good.
You've assembled a great staff, and they put together a great product today.
It's a great team. Thank you all.
One little pet peeve. I'm sorry, but I just have one little pet peeve.
I'm sorry, Judge, we have run out of time.
30 days has September, April, June, and November.
Okay. Okay. So Chelsea, what is
Just
he saying?
remember those 4 months. Not every month has 31 days.
Okay.
Great
If there are
job.
no other questions, it is, I mean, it really is a
Just
fantastic.
one more thing. Russell has an announcement. Russell wants to talk to you where he's going to do summer camp.
I don't know, I feel like it's.
Can I go? What is the summer camp thing
Sure.
about? I would
Austin
love
is
to go to summer
lovely
camp.
in the summer. The governor has announced that the special session will begin on July 8th. So he did not announce what will be on that call, but he has announced that that will be the date. So
He hasn't said what he's.
not what it's going to be, but we got the date.
Appropriations are going to be on there someplace.
So we're hoping appropriations for all of our legislative staffer friends. So, thank you.
2,000 some people.
Fun and games and.
There being no further business at this time, we're adjourned.
Governor's Looney Tunes.
It's really,